Check, yep. Oh, sorry. We all set, Paul?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ashland Planning Board meeting of Thursday, February 13th. I'll be calling the meeting to order at 7:16, and just a reminder to everyone that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. First on our agenda tonight is the clerk's report, as usual.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received 3 correspondence to the Planning Board since the last meeting. 2 have been responded to by the town planner, and 1 I will owe a clerk response, and it would fit with our general responses.
And just as a typical question that I ask you once in a while, are we keeping up to date with those responses according to your spreadsheet?
I didn't way back check, but yes, since the end of December through now, for sure, we're
Okay,
way better.
great, thank you. Always good to have a reminder when we're not. Okay, next on our agenda is public comment. We'll open up public comment both in the room and online, and a reminder that this public comment is obviously open, but if we're talking about that item on the agenda, it's best to offer your comment during that agenda item time, if you can.
Connie Mannell, resident of Ashland for 47 years, Newcastle Road. I've raised my family here and I live in Ashland because of good schools, a small town atmosphere, and open spaces. There's no doubt that the Boston area needs more affordable housing. At the same time, I feel that my town planning board and zoning boards should be able to determine appropriate housing and its spacing for Ashland. To meet the new town's MBTA law and the 40B requirement, I fear that Ashland is doing too much, too fast. In 2020, Sears built an enormous complex of 10 buildings near the train station, 398 4- and 5-story units. You would think that would go away to meet the MBTA zoning law. Constructed this year, the Ashler, connected to the Fafford complex on Chestnut Street, has 174 units, 4-story. And yet this year, in 2025, more units are in the pipeline. These are not small complexes. If all of these proposals go through, we could be accepting a very large increase in population, as much as 17%. Do we really know how such a large increase of housing units will affect the town, the schools, police, fire, traffic? How can a small town balloon its population to this extent and still maintain proper services? Many say that the MBTA housing law is unconstitutional. They don't believe that the state can lawfully restrict local towns from creating their own zoning laws. Many towns are resisting such rapid and explosive development. Affluent towns are able to forego state grants if they don't comply with 40B, but Ashland depends on the state grants. Is this equal justice? Ashland is not saying no to new housing. However, Ashland does want the right to say how new development happens. Ashland wants to determine the character of its town. In my estimation, the sanctuary in the middle of downtown does not suit the character of the town. Ashland has worked hard to beautify its small downtown. New street lights, new street traffic controls, renovating and preserving the town hall, preserving the Historical Society's Ocean House, supporting the Federated Church as a historical site, renovating the Ashland Library, erecting a Monet-like bridge over the Sudbury River with a walking trail, forming the corner spot open space for community activities, providing space for Ashland's Farmers Market, Johnstone's Pub, Erica's, Clover Road Brewing Company restaurants. Most of these buildings are only 1 or 2 stories high, white colonial or red clapboard or red brick architectures. At the last ZBA meeting, at the last zoning board hearing for the sanctuary, an Ashland Historical Commission representative stated that the proposed color, orange, and contemporary style would be inappropriate and uncharacteristic of the town. I agree. In addition, I think that installing a 250-unit apartment complex, a huge edifice compared to the rest of the town, and as high as 5 stories, towering over any other building, would not only be intrusive, it would just be plain unattractive. Town needs to work with contractors to design proposed buildings that fit the character of the towns. For example, Hopkinton is working with contractors to replace the former downtown Hopkinton drugstore. To meet the abutters' concerns, the contractor has made adjustments to the much smaller 60-unit, 3-story complex. Changes were made to mitigate issues of exhaust emissions, light and sound pollution, parking, and trash collection. More brick was added to the building's facade to help it better mirror the downtown's architecture. Even Juliet balconies were added to be more aesthetic. In short, the state, the contractor, and our town are working together to answer the need for housing, but they need to do it in a way that works for everyone. Please take the time to make it possible. Right now, it feels like too much, too fast, and unreflective of the needs of Ashland. Thank you.
I wanted to, first of all, say thank you for your comments. We always obviously welcome people from the public to come in and make statements and make, to give opinions about things that are going on in Ashland. It's important to note that I'm sure I won't speak for everyone for the board, but I know the board in general, I would say, shares your concerns. Some of these projects that you talk about were before our board, and they are no longer before our board, and we tried, as you were saying, to really look at those projects very carefully. Other ones were in our purview. Some of those projects we looked at for a year in length, the process. So we take those concerns very seriously. I think there is the two kind of things you mentioned, the 40B and the MBTA communities are very different, separate things. We have a limited control over both of them, or limited control over neither of them, I guess. The 40B project is especially is in the hands of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The MBTA legislation, obviously, we worked on drafting that bylaw, and that went before town meeting and was tried to be written in a way that would affect Ashland as little as possible. Myself, Peter, and Alvaro, as well as Joe Mignani from the Select Board, were on that working group, and that was our primary goal, is to have MBTA affect Ashland as little as possible. And hopefully we were successful in that. As time goes on, we'll see. Yeah, so we share your concerns. We've been, just recently, we sent information to the Zoning Board of Appeals that a long, actually, letter document that the Planning Board had written. I believe it's up on the website somewhere. Is that information, that 13-page
Yes,
letter?
yeah, everything's on the website.
That we then sent to that we had sent to the state about the 10 to 60 Main Street development. Unfortunately, not many of our concerns were maybe heard at that, or it didn't change anything. So we sent that letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals so that they know the process we went through and our concerns with that building when it was in front of us. It wasn't the same building in front of us, but when that project was in front of us. So we very much are trying to do what we can as a board, doing the things that are within our power to help with the situation. Unfortunately, there are limits to that I think are sometimes hard to understand about the power we have and don't have. Does anyone else want to add to that or correct me if I was mistaken in any way?
I would just like to echo, thank you for the comments, but what I think this brings up, and it actually is one of the reasons I wanted to be on the planning board, is have more people involved, right? Our zoning does not have to be stagnant. We are the board that does that, but people can propose things and talk to the board, and I think our zoning does need to be updated, right? And it's not that it's never been updated, but I think there's a way, which I can't comment about those, whether it's going to change anything in those projects. I mean, probably if they're, but if you see a community active and cares and is asking for updates to zoning, that does mean something, and that is doable. So I appreciate it, and I think that people should not leave it to us, because we're residents as well, and we don't do this full time, so I welcome any help on that, and very active, and I'm so excited to hear that, so thank you.
It feels like 40B takes away our ability to determine our future, what kind of town we will have in the end. But beyond that, if I may, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are towns that are forgoing 40B because they don't feel that they need the grants, the state grants. But Ashland needs the state grants. And that to me is unjust. It's what's the right word? Financially unequal.
I think, and please, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's in regard to MBTA, that they're foregoing those things. I don't think a 40B I don't think that's related to any kind of funding.
So 40B is a state mandate that dates back to 1969. Comes out with the Fair Housing Market Act, which is a federal law that rolls out in the late 60s, right? There's no way to get around 40B. It's a state mandate that all communities have 10% of their housing stock considered affordable. That's what 40B is. MBTA is a zoning which came down, and actually the court in the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts just came down with a decision and stated that it is constitutional for the state of Massachusetts to make cities and towns zone in a way to make housing in close proximity to train stations, right? In communities that have transportation infrastructure, such as the MBTA, to zone land no less than 50 acres for housing by right. And so that is, they're two different programs, but they do so, and you can get them crisscross, but there are two different separate matters.
Well, how
and
much?
To tie that back to your comment, I'm sorry to interrupt. To tie that back to your comment, the communities that are not compliant with MBTA zoning, is totally different from 40B, as Peter explained. Those communities with certain grant funding.
I see.
So that's MBTA zoning.
I was confused.
That's not 40B.
Correct. And
Okay.
those communities, such as Milton is the community that had the, was brought to court, by the Attorney General. They now have until July 14th to adopt bylaws that will comply with the MBTA zoning laws. And/or the next step will be taken by the state of Massachusetts.
Do you have any jurisdiction about the size of the buildings that are put on the sites?
So that refers back to 40B, and 40B is, so the whole process of 40B, and in short, the answer is no. 40B goes to the zoning board of appeals for what's known as a comprehensive permit. It goes through the 40B process, so it disregards a community's bylaws, right? And then it creates a project, right? And it has to be a project of eligibility, then it has to be a project which receives a project eligibility letter from a subsidizing housing agency, such as Mass Housing, and then that gives them the ability to file the application. And so this is the process we're in right now, where the community works with the developer to help mold that project. That's, we're on our second meeting or our second public hearing of the application of the 10 to 60 Main Street project. Last meeting, we talked about traffic, as you know, and I think it was a very successful meeting. And I think the next meeting, we're gonna talk about civil design and traffic. And think each topic will be discussed in front of the zoning board of appeals, and hopefully the project can start to be molded in a way where it's acceptable to all, the applicant and the town.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Carolyn Bell, Concord Street. I just have a question. So under that 40B then, they could build a 8-story building or a 10-story building?
I'm not gonna say here and say yay or nay, but in theory, that's the road that you could go down from a developer. Now, there's a lot of twists and turns, from a safety standpoint, but yeah, they could propose a building. They're proposing a building that they believe fits onto that site.
The reason why I asked was I vaguely remember at a town meeting that the town passed a downtown plan.
Correct.
And I thought there was 3 stories?
Yeah, that was in 2022, and actually, we were on the board when we updated that bylaw, and we did set in a 3-story maximum from the street. Now, that would be for a project using the Ashland Downtown Overlay District. And so, however, this is not using the Ashland Downtown Overlay District. This is using state 40B regulations. And so as their permitting avenue, per se. And so that's why it's above the maximum. And so the applicant is asking for a waiver as part of their application from multiple bylaws. One of those bylaws is the height the height restriction, or the height maximum, per se, in the Ashland Downtown Overlay District.
So just as Hopkinton adjusted or became, the project was sensitive to the community's wishes, is it possible to negotiate with the contractor and say that, how many stories is this? 5?
Yes.
Is it possible to say to him, 5 is really high?
It's 100% possible, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I have 2 people online with their hand up. First and foremost, Mr. Mark Dessoni. Mr. Mark Dessoni, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mark Dessoni, 119 Main Street. And I'm glad the first 2 got up there to speak and planning board answered back. I am saying about the planning board and the ZBA get a little bit stronger with the state about this MBTA housing, but that's one step I don't want to get into. What I was saying is the 1040 Main Street, that I made copies for each board for. I know that Mr. Town Planning, you still got my sheet?
I have your sheet, Mark. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. That sheet, even though it's all zoned in and stuff like that, I would like to have the planning board take a look at that, see if we can combine planning logic with the zoning, so it can fight harder to the state and let the state know that the planning board can't be rolled over like the ZBA is going to be because of the state regulations. it's not worth keeping if the state's gonna say, oh, there's only a small town, Ashland, rural town, Ashland, and Milton's another one that's against us, there's only gonna be two, and they're not gonna hear logically what's gonna happen. Oh, I'm looking at it as per se, get these codes stronger. Zoning and combined with the planning board, with self-regulations. To make it a strong suit. And then understand from there. Because I was at the CBA public forum there last night, and I got tongue tied because it was all traffic, not everything else. But everything else that I have on the sheet that you have, Peter, that I want you to make, if you can, make copies and give to the planning board, is those ones to combine together, not just for MBTA and the 4060 Main, but for all other projects, either residential, mixed build, or stuff like that, to show that this town is looking forward, growing forward with the generation coming, that it can see worth the time. Because this board has really not worked down the road understanding what is for the future. They just see it, hear it from other people, and hear it from developers and from inside the town hall building itself, which I am all for. But to understand that people coming down in the future and maybe newer businesses coming around, if this federal government freeze can be still.
Mark,
Yes.
I'm gonna stop you there, and I'm gonna say I'm happy to share that letter that you sent, that you hand wrote with the zoning board with the planning board, and then we can kind of continue our conversation.
Okay, in other words, if I was at the CBA last night, I would have been over 3 minutes, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm all
All
set.
right, I'm gonna move on to Ms. Joan Friday. Please unmute.
Yes, Joan Friday, One Shore Road, Ashland, on the Historical Commission, but speaking as an individual resident. First, I'd like to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the two ladies who spoke. I'm sure you'll be shocked. But I also just wanted to thank the planning board. I read your letter that you sent, obviously, to the mass housing, but also that you included in your letter to the ZBA. And I just thought it was a really, really great letter. And I really appreciate the fact that you incorporated the historical issues in there. So that's just my comment, and thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Joan.
All right, thank you. Seeing no more hands, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is, speaking of history, the Ashland Historical Commission that has a presentation for us about a proposed historic district. So, Mr. Nielsen?
Yeah. You can actually kind of put this down, right? And I would. You put it up. 1 minute. Paul, did I do something? Did you shut it off? Maybe. Yeah, I'll just put it here. Yeah, so I would just put it here,
Okay, so
but then you're gonna share.
I'm going to share this right up here. Local Historic District.
1 minute.
Yep.
Where's the Zoom?
Yeah. That starts at the top. Right here. And it says, yeah,
Yeah, so you can just control it.
I
by
can
that.
just go up and down.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Are we ready to go? Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Nielsen. I'm the chairman of the Ashland Historical Society. I know it's very funny, but it's no, it's very funny that I'm also the chairman of the Local Historic Study Committee. How that happened, but I'm here tonight to update the planning board from the last time I was here on what we've been doing with the proposal for a local historic district in the downtown area. We've made quite a bit of progress. This is a project we've been working on for over 2 years. And I just have a short PowerPoint presentation. I don't know, does everybody, this was sent to you a while ago, the district report. Does anybody need a copy of it? It was in an email a long time ago.
I'll take a hard copy if
Yeah,
you have an, if
yeah.
you have an extra one.
Thank you.
Now, this was prepared by outside consultant Stacy Spies, who is on Zoom with us tonight if there's any questions about it, the methodology or anything like that. And Stacy has a lot of history. She's from Hopkinton, and she knows a lot about historical preservation and has done this for many different towns. Ashland's one of the few towns in the area that does not have a local historic district. I'll just back up a bit. It's proposed, and this was all, we've had numerous meetings. We had our first, the public hearing, and beginning of last month, and it's already been approved by the Massachusetts Commission, Historical Commission. So the next step in this, I'm having a couple more meetings. We're talking to different groups, and I'd like tonight, if I could, get an approval from the planning board or some kind of letter or note saying that you approve of this. So that's why I'm here, to answer questions and try to just tell you exactly what's going on with this. Like I said, Ashland does not have a historic district in lieu of what's been going on downtown with all the improvements and the whole controversy about the mill building. We decided that we would go forth and try to do something about it. And why create a local historic district? A local historic district is the only mechanism available to preserve historic buildings. You've probably heard of the National Historic Register or demo delays. Those are all fine and good, but they don't prevent anything in the long term. If you're on the National Historic Register, you can still take the building down. The only thing in this state is the local historic district. And what that does, we're quickly losing historical buildings, as said by the Mills building and other buildings around town. But reason we concentrated on the downtown area, because a lot of the historic buildings in Ashland are spread out. It's an old farming community. And what this has to be is contiguous. And it has to be a contiguous area. Not everything in it is historical, but everything in it that is historical, you can't change the outer facade or alter anything structurally from the character of the time period that it is. And an interesting point came up at the public hearing. They're not all the same time period, these buildings, but it's actually, we have a little bit of everything. So it's kind of like a time capsule. This is from the 1830s. This is from the 1850s. This is from 1933, 1929. So it's kind of a unique situation. We have all kinds of different things in Ashland. Let me just go down. This is the map. And as you can see, it's strictly in the downtown area. It starts up by, it includes the Ashland Historical Society's building, the Ocean House, goes down through the mill buildings. Even though this is a 40B issue, they're not going to be probably included in it, but they will be in the district for contiguity? I don't know. And then it goes down Main Street with the building next to the church is a store. I have all the documentation that I could send anybody on the actual history. A history has been done on each of these properties. The Federated Church, all the way down to the corner, down to the library across the street, around to the post office, the block where there used to be Eber's Pharmacy, which is now where the pizza place is, and the old train station, Town Hall, John Stone's, the old Ashland General Store, which is now Lunker's, the old fire station. Some of these buildings are town-owned, but most of them are in private hands. And there's only one building that's an actual house. That's the Purple House. And she's been at the meetings, and she's all for she's gung-ho about the whole idea of preserving a local historic district in the downtown area. We've had some pushback, but we're going to go forward. For example, 4854 Front Street, which is more commonly called the Masons Block, was built in 1882. The historic name is the Abner Greenwood Block, and the common name is the Masonic Lodge. It's been used since the Masons since 1884. They've had a variety of businesses on the first floor, but they was a brief, I think, 1920 to 23, they weren't in there, but they've been in there for over 100 years. And we had somebody from the Masons here at our public hearing, and he was generally supportive. He's the man in charge of the buildings. Going down, I've just included a few. Everything is in here. Of course, John Stone's, actually called the Railroad House, Captain John Stone's Hotel, which was built in 1834, predating the town of Ashland. He got inside information that the railroad was coming to town and built his hotel to get the railroad crowd. And he built it too close to the tracks, which it still is, but Stone's is one of the most iconic buildings in Ashland. If you ask anybody from out of town, where do you live? Ashland. Oh, I know, I've been to John Stone's, or I've been to Stone's. So it's very well recognized. Another building, well, the historic Central Fire Station, which has now been repurposed as a brew pub, I believe. It hasn't quite opened yet, but this is a good example of what we're talking about with the historic district. We're not looking to regulate any kind of business or what goes in it. We don't care. It's really only about the facade of the building and keeping the original architecture, the facade, what you can see from the street. If they wanted to expand that, they can go out back where you can't see it from the street, no problem. Like I said, it's from fences. There's certain, I'll get to it, but there's certain things that are regulated and certain things that aren't. And you have a copy of the bylaw at the back of this, which is being proposed. Oh, of course. Boston and Albany Railroad Station, which is now an accountant's office, but it's also been a vet and various different things. This is one of the last railroad stations that they think H.R. Richardson, the famous Boston architect, had something to do with. It was actually built after he died, but his office was involved. And it's the same style. Along this line, I think the only three left are in Wellesley, besides Ashland. Framingham and two stops in Wellesley, I think, are the four buildings for the railroad design. Built in 1887, it went out of commission in 1960 when they stopped doing the passenger service, and then it went into private hands. And right now, it's still in private hands. It's being used as an office. Another example, the building's been repurposed many times. We're not looking to change anything that's inside. It's just the exterior. Federated Church of Ashland. Federated Church has been around since 1835. The land that it sits on was actually bought, they bought it from John Stone himself. And one of the members is the historian there, and he's found the deed back in 1835 from Captain Stone. This is a good example. It's the last church, federal-style church left in the downtown. There used to be a few more, if you look at the histories, that have burned over the years. This one, if it ever does stop being a church, for whatever reason, this will preserve the facade. You know, it can be repurposed to something else, but the actual steeple and the facade, what you can see from the street, would be protected. In other words, if they were to sell it to a developer, he could not, or she could not tear it down just to put up more apartment blocks or something like that, unless they incorporate it into the design, which we don't have with the mill buildings. And this one is called the Wiggins Block. It doesn't look like it's very historical, but it's actually from 1850. And you have the vinyl siding and things like that, which people say, well, that's not historical. Doesn't matter. It actually is an 1850 building. It's the home of the original Ashland Public Library, back when it was the Ashland Agricultural Library, before we had the library, which is now next to the one we use now, which was, of course, a Andrew Carnegie grant that was put in 1902, when Carnegie was financing a slew of libraries in local towns if they came up with the money matching funds, which Ashland did in 1902. So the Wiggins Block is historical. It doesn't look like much from the outside, but it's from 1850. And, the last one I put in here is, it's Eber's Pharmacy, or the Ashland Pharmacy. It's now Zen Dental. This building and the one next to it with the pizza places, there's two separate parcels, we're preserving as an example of 1933. As you can see, there's different time periods in downtown Ashland. This was the drugstore in downtown Ashland, and older residents can tell you that's where they went for their medicine. And next door was also a market. Now it's a dental office. Again, I know since I've been here, it's been Napa Auto Parts, and it's been another market, a couple different kinds of markets. But again, that's it, making it contiguous, and it goes across the street from that, the U.S. Post Office, what I didn't put a picture of in this presentation, but the post office itself is an example of 1939 Art Deco, which is also unique. They didn't do very many of them. And so the U.S. government, and we've all seen the mural inside, which is a WPA project mural from the 30s, depicting the arrival of the train to Ashland, which I think everybody's seen. I think John Stone's in the actual picture. Okay. What's a local historic district? Like I said, it's a contiguous area group of historic structures. What we're going to need, it required an approval by the Mass Historic Commission, which we got, and we're going to need a 2/3 vote at town meeting. We're currently working on the warrant to be on the town meeting this spring. We originally we're thinking we could have done it in the fall, but we didn't have enough time, and we want to publicize it a little bit more and get it on in the spring. So if 2/3 of the people that go to the town meeting vote for it, it will become a law, and it'll be a district. Now, the district commission, which will be created if the district passes, is made up of local residents. And there's a selection process. Some are architects, some are real estate people. There's a whole procedure you have to do. And they'll be the ones that will rule over or be sitting on things that come up before the commission, or if somebody wants to make a change. The historic district is exclusively in the downtown area, like I said, from the Ocean House to the post office and back. There's also something I should mention. It's not a bylaw, but there's a set of guidelines that have been prepared, and it's up on the website. Those are informal. Those are to give developers an idea of what the commission, if it's created, would be looking for. We can only do an informal one right now. It won't become part of the bylaw, and the future commission, Historic District Commission, will make the final say on that, if and when it's formed. So right now, it's more of a reference point. So if you want to look at it, I don't have a copy of it with me, but it's up on the town website under the Historical Commission. And what does a local historic district do? It preserves the exterior of historically and architecturally significant buildings, protects the character of the downtown, increases property values. Studies have been done. Downtown revitalization, Main Street is an economic revitalization program, and it's kind of fitting in well with what we've already been doing in Ashland. with the reconstruction of the downtown sidewalks, the lamps, and the comprehensive planning commission. I'm forgetting the actual name of it. There's lots of components in that are about historical preservation. So I think it's kind of dovetailing nicely into the whole thing. And studies have said there's no more cost-effective program of economic development of any kind in the U.S. today. It's cheaper and more efficient to reuse old buildings than it is to build from scratch. And it's also a way to have more local control over that area of town. Not just the planning board, which will still have say over what goes in down there. But if one of these properties that isn't historic, and the example I always give is a liquor store, and let's say he wanted to sell it, it's in the district, and somebody wanted to build something on there, it would have to go before the commission so that it's architecturally appropriate for the area. It's a hard thing to define. It's kind of like a character, vibe kind of thing, but you don't want to put I grew up in Walpole. Have anybody ever been to downtown Walpole lately? When you go into 27, you go into the railroad bridge, there's a huge, like 6, 7-story condo building right there. It used to be the old Fales factory, and it just looked wildly out of place. That's what's happening to downtown Ashland, and this is one way to try to prevent that. And what does it not do? It does not control property usage or what people can do inside the buildings. Does not control what businesses are allowed, doesn't prevent new construction. They just have to get a certificate of appropriateness, which is something that if you're doing any major construction, minor renovations are not a big deal. If there's something major, they were changing the physical character, the architecture of the building, then they would have to get they'd have to go before the commission and get a certificate of appropriateness, much like you would have to do with many other things. Studies have shown it does not decrease property values. And it only applies to the portion of the building, like I said, that you can see from the street. So the Ashland Center Historical District Commission will be created when this passes. The Historic District is made up of local residents, like I said, and it's responsible for overseeing the district's bylaw. The bylaw is in this folder, in this pamphlet. Commission's also responsible for establishing a non-binding set of guidelines, which I already mentioned. And in summary, the Historic District creates a thoughtful community-based review process that protects historically significant buildings from demolition and inappropriate alterations to retain the unique character of downtown Ashland. Now, as somebody who's been on the Historical Commission since it was reconstituted in 2020, we spend an awful lot of time with demolition delays. Where people want to just tear down the house and start over again. And we've updated the bylaw, but a demolition delay is only good for a year, and then they can do what they want. So we were kind of thinking, how do you protect, the mill building really got it started. It's too late for that probably, but you never know. If plans fall through and all that kind of, who knows what's going to happen. But that's why the mill building's included in the designation of the district in case something does happen. But this would give us more local control over what goes in downtown. Just another added layer. It's not telling people what to do what business to put in there, just to keep the downtown character intact. So, questions? Oh, everybody's fine. Great.
I had a couple just because I think we've seen some of the buildings you showed and that were on the list just prompted some questions for me. So I know you mentioned, it doesn't impact what goes in, but we have seen projects before us that in order to bring the building or the space up to code for the use, changes need to be made. The fire station is a prime example of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new door in that can be seen from the street. That wasn't there.
Some of the things that are excluded are paint color, roofs, solar panels, energy efficient windows. I mean, we say storm windows. I mean, nobody's really putting storm windows on anymore, but they're more energy efficient windows. Screens.
And I apologize if it's in. I've been trying to read the bylaw as you were chatting, but in the case of the firehouse, there's a door that was not there previously. It was a solid wall that is now an ADA accessible door that had to be put in order to make it usable as a brew pub. So my reading, my sort of understanding so far is that door would have run afoul of this
Not necessarily.
before the
If they'd have to go in front of the commission to explain what its use was and to make it ADA compliant for the business.
And the commission would have to approve.
The commission would have to, not, I wouldn't say they would approve it automatically, but if the case can be made, that that's what we need, I think the commission would allow it. I can't predict what future people are gonna say.
So that sort of brings me to my next question. So I think that would be certainly an additional hurdle. I mean, that would have been an additional hurdle for Cliff Road, which is, you know, when they were before the planning board, obviously we needed that door there in order for them to open. You know, things like that do limit use if you can't bring the building safely up to code for the use that is proposed. And so what brings me to the next question is, who is appointing the members of this commission?
Select board.
Okay.
Select board is in charge of appointing them. Like I said, there's a selection process. They solicit 2 people from the real estate industry, 2 people from there's an Architectural Association of Massachusetts. That's who is made up of the local study committee, and 2 people from the Historic Society. Or if they can't fill that, then the select board will appoint people that they do.
And again, I apologize.
No, that's
I'm trying
fine.
to read as we go. And then my last question is, the police station is included?
No, police station is not included. We've
Okay.
excluded the police station because it's getting torn, as far as we know, it's getting torn down. If it doesn't get torn down and repurposed, it's just a non-conforming building within the thing. So it's only 1978, it doesn't count as.
That was my question.
It's only 1978, so it doesn't count as historic, significant architecturally or age-wise.
So is the appendix, is this a list of buildings that are included?
Mhm.
The
Your police station says NA next to it, I just saw that tonight, not applicable.
Okay, so this is just a list of addresses that are within the district?
Mhm.
Okay.
Stacy-
I just want to add to that comment on the Clover one. The accessible door was on the side of the building, so that really is not something that counts for historic preservation point of view. It is actually the street facade that really counts for historic
Okay.
preservation.
So even though you can see it from the street because it's so close to
Correct.
the
Yeah.
front,
It is actually the front elevation that really counts to,
strictly
Yeah.
the facade, okay.
so you can create accessible entrances if required for a commercial purpose close to a parking spot or easily accessible, just so that you give equal weightage. That's all the logic is.
I was
So-
worried about how close that door was to the street where it's very visible.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sorry, Deepa, so you were making a clarification about this, that you know about the historic districts?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I worked on a couple of historic preservation projects, and the importance is to the actual facade, front entry, and not to the sides of the building, because you have to give accessibility to the building.
Which most
just
of
to
them
be
don't have,
kind of
obviously.
Make sure that it is
Right.
diverse as
Right.
well, so from that point of view, so the sides don't really count, it's actual facade
Okay.
on the street side.
Thank you. Kate, do you have?
Yeah, I have a question. So you talk about the front, so in theory, a developer can purchase one of these historic properties and cut everything away and leave it like a LA movie set, right?
well, in theory.
No, I
But
just
you
thought-
also have the planning board, and you also have, this is just strictly concerned with the historical aspect. They
No,
can't, they
yeah.
can't build like, a 10-story.
I
apartment
understand,
building
but
behind
it is literally technically, if someone wanted to implement, they can make the movie set facade, leave that, and do anything that's in compliance with
Yep,
our bylaws and zoning.
Yep.
Okay.
yep.
Great
Along with the
examples are
bylaws.
Faneuil,
Yeah.
the downtown building where you have the Millennial Park. They kept the original, I think, I forget, it was a kind of a commercial building. So they kept that floor, and there's a Millennial glass building behind it.
Yeah, and a
that's
good,
a great
a good example too, it's just so in Hopkinton, across from the town hall, the building that burned down, my chiropractor used to be in the back of it. He rebuilt that, the owner on his own initiative rebuilt the front, but they let him build a lot more in the back. So that building, if you look at it now, it's a lot larger than it used to be, but the sprawl goes out in the back. So the front, he didn't have to do that, but he did it because, he wanted to be a good citizen of the town. So, and my consultant Stacy has more information on that if anybody wants to hear it, but Stacy, do you know if there's any other reasons that would be concerned with like doors on the side or anything like that? Is she unmuting?
Stacy, I made you a co-host, so please unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. It was saying I wasn't allowed to be unmuted. Hi. Yes, actually, I'm a former chair of the Historic District Commission in Hopkinton, and that's actually a good example. When that house burned down, he took it as an opportunity to do some upgrades, and what they brought to the commission was, the front would be, it's a former house in the front. That was a way to kind of keep the streetscape. And so then it had been apartments in the house, and then some offices, and then they ended up turning it into condos. So I think they got 5 or 6 condo units out of it. And it's a larger addition in the back, but it's the original volume in the front. Something else that can be done is it had some kind of Victorian detail up in the gable peak. And since that wasn't really as visible from the eye, since he had, made the efforts to try and recreate, what had been there, the commission in Hopkinton decided, and your commission could too, to say, you know what, it's okay if you use the Trex, that sort of plastic lumber. Nobody can tell up there. It's fine. So it's, it's a give and take. Oh, and also I did want to also say real quickly about, you were talking about the other facades. The way the bylaw is written is that anything that's visible from the street is reviewable, but things like ADA compliance are just common sense. And I could see maybe, if let's say like the firehouse has the arched openings, from the where the garage doors are, maybe when they put in the ADA door on the side, they do like a little arch over that door. So it's all about being reasonable. That's why when Jim was talking about guidelines, it's better to kind of have guidelines going into it, and then you can use that. But things, that way they can keep being updated. When the laws were written in Massachusetts, there weren't heat pumps, there weren't electric vehicle charging stations, there weren't well, they're come and gone already, like the satellite dishes. So there's all sorts of new innovations that keep coming. And so the good idea about guidelines is it kind of says, is what you want to do reversible? Say someone wanted to put in a wood accessibility ramp. You can put a wood ramp in, and then you pull it back out, somewhere down the line if it isn't needed. A lot of it's kind of common sense approaches to it.
So I do want to go back to that and just clarify, because I am reading
Sure.
the bylaw as proposed, and it says anything visible from it. So it clarifies beyond facade. So I wonder.
It's not just the facade. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that.
So
might
that's
be
why I was saying that
food
it's
for thought.
certainly the facade is the primary of the concerns, because usually the facade traditionally has the most detail to it, and the most effort design wise goes into the facade. But yeah, so it's anything that's why you get things like heat pumps and electric vehicle chargers and stuff. Hopkinton even because that involves town hall, the drive up voter booth drop-offs got reviewed. Yeah, the drop-offs got reviewed, and it got was a certificate of appropriateness and a quick stamp. So not everything is
I think this
complex.
is an important thing to know, what the regulation will actually be on it as written by Ashland, though if hey, it has to go by the state, is there local control, right?
Well, this is
Wait a
yeah,
minute,
go ahead.
because I think it's an important question that, could the commission hold up the coming of a new business because of the ADA access, which is common sense, but is that written into the bylaw shall not be unreasonably withheld, or is it not? Is it in the hands of the commission? And it might be it seems like common sense, but it could also be unreasonably withheld. I think it's important to know that information.
There is, an appeal process, I should say. There's like a person aggrieved, so there is a process in there, for that sort of, issue. I know, it's hard to, it's hard to legislate common sense, because it is
So
common sense.
I think just for purposes of clarifying our conversation, so I think, Deepa, you have dealt with communities where it is just the facade. It looks like this bylaw is proposing more than just the facade. And I'm wondering if, there might be like some sort of a compromise, like, Deepa, maybe if you're familiar with communities that are only restricting to the facade, maybe that's a better fit for Ashland versus this sort of more all-encompassing, anything visible from the street, which could be a significant hurdle to economic development in our downtown, which we are putting so much effort into. I think the community is extremely excited about something like Clover Road. That's also a very small business, and to have, or not very, it's a small business, local business, to have them have that additional hurdle just to become ADA compliant. That was also my recollection is that they were really the only business that was really eager to go into the fire department, to that space. And so like sort of adding additional deterrence for something like making the building accessible, if that triggers to go to the commission. And again, it's a lot of what ifs, and
Well,
we wouldn't imagine that the commission
I
would have
think
an
she
issue,
just
but-
said, though, that the ADA compliance stuff is exempted. So there's a list of exemptions in there. This was all
It's
vetted,
not.
but this was all vetted by the state. And it's been put
Yeah.
together. It's virtually, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a lot of boilerplate.
This is the, bylaw that was created, that the Massachusetts Historical Commission, the state level, recommends, because this is the one that stood up to, legal challenges. This is the one that's widely accepted. I can pull up, I'll have to pull it up for you. There is a hierarchy. I'll pull it up.
Where are
the
the
citation. We can
exclusions,
check with
Amanda?
council. There is a hierarchy of which commissions have power over the others. For example, historic districts have, if there's a building in a historic district that wants a demo delay, the district is the higher level of requirements. So they get the demo delay defers to Historic District Commission. I'm going to double check and make sure there's something about that for Planning Commission too, because something like ADA would certainly be more a higher order, I guess, is a way of saying it, a higher order requirement. So Historic District would defer to that. I'll pull up that citation.
Yeah, let me
Get that
ask
to you.
if there's any more questions, from the board.
I mean, I just have a comment to speak to what's visible. I think just like we're saying, legislate common sense, and when we're talking like heat pumps and things, like someone might not think about it. Well, okay, we have actually an example, Starbucks, right, that didn't come the way the planning board did about some infrastructure, right? And so I think the visible from the facade makes sense to include, to make sure that there's, for simple things that really can be, if they're thought out of view and slightly, so I think I 100% agree that the ADA is different, and I would assume that does take precedence,
I
right?
think it would.
But as far as keeping it in of visible, I think that absolutely should stay.
Yeah.
I think, I think there's a whole lot of there's going to be a whole lot of gray area. Those are like two examples. But in, in some areas of the downtown, we know that, there isn't a lot of place to go, right? And so I'm wondering about how many single-family homes or, two-family homes are included in this district. And then, say if, they want to stay, but they need more space. I'm an architect. I have, this is a typical request by the client. I want to stay in my house, but we need more space.
But
right? And so, hold on, let me finish my question. And so it's often would be very hard, again, the visibility for it to be all behind the building. It might be on the side, it might be, and I understand that then this would go through the Historic Commission. It would have to kind of fit a certain style, right, to fit in with the downtown. It would need to go through a review in that way.
It would have to go through a review, but there's no really one style for the downtown. That's what I was trying to say before. There's all kinds of different styles. And as far as the residential goes, there's, like I said, there's only one, the Purple House.
That's the only
And
single.
that's the only
which is-
residential. That's the only residential, and we did that on purpose. So we could have gone up Main Street further with all the houses going up to 135. We didn't. We stopped with the downtown because it's mostly commercial. There's a lot of town-owned property, and we weren't going to get into, that's totally, I mean, that's why there's no paint color restriction, because who wants a purple house, right? But that's, it's already there. So it's not a, and some of the, I mean, the house on Pleasant Street where they did a really nice job of fixing up on the corner there of, what's the, Tilton?
Yeah.
On the corner there, I'm
the
talking about the yellow
Victorian
house with
kind
the
of, yeah.
green and the, that's a beautiful example of having the money and restoring an old Victorian. That doesn't happen every day, and a lot of people can't afford it, and we hear that too. We wish we could help people, and we're looking at a program for people to restore their historic houses with state money or whatever. One thing I did forget to mention, though, too, I don't know if you folks are aware of the cemetery project that's going on behind the church, the restoration of the old village cemetery.
I know there's been work done.
We've
there
been
recently.
redoing the whole. They've been cleaning all the stones, reposting them. That's part of the district. That will qualify for grants if this is part of a district. So there'll be additional money available. Right now, it's all kind of private. Very little town. The DPW helps every once in a while bring water over or something when they're cleaning the stones. But that's just a minor thing.
So another question. I'm looking at the building, which I think the address, I think it's 9 Homer Ave. It's not the one on the corner, not the little brick one on the corner that you mentioned, but the one around the corner, which is a little strip mall.
No, not the, well, what's going in, that's where that development is.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
own,
why I'm
no,
wondering.
no, it's not, the brown strip mall there, the one right across from the train station, that's
Yeah.
not included in this. The one that's
So-
right there that has pizzeria, what is it?
Well, it's in the blue line.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's in
oh,
an
that's a
odd
mistake.
lot.
Okay, that's a mistake.
That's a mistake,
Yeah,
if
no,
it's in the blue line,
line.
that was supposed to be corrected. That was, because we actually originally had Erica's in there too, and we took that out,
Okay.
because that could be converted back to a house at some point.
What about a question like, okay, that little one-story brick building that we're talking about that's on the curve, I think it's the 5 Homer Ave. What about if that business, the owner there wanted to add a second floor? I mean, it's a low building in a downtown that's getting taller. It's a little bit, in my personal opinion, a little bit too low to hold that corner. So is that something that would be disallowed?
It
or
would
it's
be
like
reviewable,
it would be reviewable because
but
you're
it's not
holding.
necessarily disallowed. Like, new construction is not disallowed.
because you're
It's
hold-
reviewable.
Okay, because you're holding on to the facade of the building and.
Yeah,
And
if it,
looking
like,
to add to it.
I'll give you a good.
A
we
la
did-
the example
We didn't
downtown.
include, I think a good example of that is where the bagel table is. They kind of blended that into like the surrounding neighborhood, that building. It doesn't look out of place. Whereas the corner building where the condos are, that replace the Alberini property, we think that's a little bit over the top for downtown Ashland. But that's just the opinion of the commission. We can't do anything about that. That's included too, and that's already,
That's
grandfathered.
128 Main that you're talking about?
What's that?
128 Main.
Yeah, 128.
I also note that it's a little, this map is a little confusing in here because it's obviously quite an old map that you're
That's the
using.
assessor's map.
Oh,
That's the assessor's map.
so there's, okay,
So,
yeah. Yeah, so there's obviously changes in here. There's no corner spot on here. The 128 building isn't on here.
yeah,
So-
that's what they have for a map right now. yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, the banks are included in this, but as non-performing, or whatever it is, non-conforming structures within the district. In other words, if somebody wanted to buy, say Santander goes away, and somebody bought it and wanted to put in something, it would be reviewable by the commission, but not necessarily, we're not going to prevent construction.
So are all the buildings that are on the list represented in these images and called out as such?
Yes, there's an inventory of
Okay.
all those buildings.
I saw the list, but
Yeah,
they're-
the list, and I don't know if all of them are in there, they're all on the Macris list with the state.
Okay.
They all had to be registered and, signed off on. So they're all registered with the state, which is a list of historical properties or not historical properties. It's like an inventory of the history of the property. Like when the building was built, what style it is, ownership, that kind of thing.
And have you had any other responses? You mentioned a few people,
A few people
like
who just
from-
don't want change and be told what to do,
I'm never getting my sentence in here.
I'm sorry.
Like from the Federated Church or John Stones, are they like all for it?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
I haven't heard, like I said, the only person, any of the businesses that's come to a meeting or the public hearing, people that came to the public hearing were against it. They didn't own anything in the district. They're just against it in general principle of another government regulation. But anybody that actually, letters have been sent out a couple times now. There's been published notices in the paper and online and that kind of thing. So, no, I'm kind of surprised I haven't heard from more people.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
More, any other
I have
questions?
a question. So there's the bylaw, and then you referenced guidelines, which come later. But how does that? So we go to town meeting in May, and we vote. How to just?
You're not voting on the bylaws, and they're not.
The guidelines.
The guidelines. I mean, they're not. What's the word?
Not binding?
Not binding.
Okay.
They're not binding. They're suggestions.
Okay, that's what I was kind
They're
of.
there to give somebody an idea of what the commission's looking for.
Yeah.
Whether or not they actually can do it or not. I mean, it's a starting point, so they can just come in blind and say, "What do you want?"
Yeah, no,
There's
they
a-
need
there's
that,
a-
and that's helpful to.
There's a
applicants.
guideline, it's just a rule of thumb, and that can change.
Yeah.
Like I said, instead of updating a bylaw, which is harder to change, you can update the guidelines as time goes on.
Okay, because like people do want to know what they're
Yeah.
voting on clearly, so that is, suggestions to get people started, just like we have.
Which
but
is
it's
why we're
not-
trying to do as many of these kind of
Yeah.
things as we can to get the word out, I've been here now twice. I'm going to the select board again. I've been to various groups in town. We've been at Ashland Day. We've been at the farmer's market. Generally, the public in general, if they hear about it, are in favor of it. It's a very few local individuals who are against it. But everybody generally seems to have a nice, I don't know. It's just that my perception of it is totally unscientific. But, I mean, it was it's going to depend on 2/3, which is a big hurdle at a town meeting.
I mean, I mean, as the comprehensive plan is moving along, we are well past the community that spoke, which was a decent percentage through that, saying preserve historic Ashland small town feel. We had some people that came out of their house and joined us tonight that's what I heard them speaking. So I think there is community support for this.
I hope so.
I've worked on a couple of historic projects, and I think the folks that I worked with have so much passion for the kind of work that they do. But in reality, I'm curious, random scenario, if for some reason Mills Building was not in the position that it is today, and we had this historic district in place, would this have prevented us from having a 40B in that location at all?
No. 40B trumps this completely.
So having said that, you began the presentation saying a lot of these buildings in this map right now are town-owned building.
Few of them.
But there seems to be always a way around this so-called I feel good because it's a historic district feeling. Is it beating the purpose? Is it reaching the goal that you're trying to get to? Because it feels like there's always a way around this, even whether it's a historic district or not. So I'm not sure if you really want to preserve those facades on that main street, should we get a little more stringent with what you have as kind of your bylaws guidelines to make sure that your ultimate goal is met? Because right now, to me, after hearing all the conversations, it feels like this is coming up only for Mills Building as a main project, because all the others are town-owned. So is there something that we can make this a little more stringent so that there's no way you can bypass this to get another 5-story building in that street.
Well, that's the whole point of the district, because like I said, that's the only thing in Massachusetts that you can do. Somerville, for example, does individual buildings, but they do it through a process of city council, which is a lot easier to do. You know, this building will be a local historic district, or that building. Can't do that in Ashland because we don't have the people or support to maintain commissions for each and every building, you know. Hopkinton's downtown district is quite small, actually. It's not as big as you think it is. But that is the only, because I did a lot of research on this, because people say, oh, we'll just put it on the National Register, you know. Well, won't fly. That's the same thing. And, you know, I have had people say, well, they did a good job with this building and that building when the people restored it. I said, yeah, that's true, you know. But if you really, our mission is to preserve, at the historical mission, is to preserve the architectural and historical assets of the town of Ashland. And this is the only way I could see that not everything, but a good chunk of the downtown area could be preserved for future generations. Nothing's perfect. You know, I don't have a crystal ball to say what would happen in the future, but I don't know if they've ever been overturned. Stacy, have any of these districts ever been, like, decertified?
Oh, decertified? I don't believe so. I mean, there've been some challenges, because there's always the, you know, sometimes you'll get demolition by neglect,
Yeah.
which happens. But I don't think there have been any that have been decertified.
Yeah.
I could check that for you, but nothing comes to mind.
No, this just came because you don't know what's going to happen down the future. But you know, and we're not advocating for like strong arming people, telling them what to do with their property. You know, and that's the major complaint I get from some people, that you can't tell us what to do. It's my property.
Also, Jim, it's worth just noting, because I know you had talked about you know, there's a specific call for an architect and a realtor. There's also spaces on the commission specifically set aside for property owners.
Property owners
So-
in the district, right?
In the district, yeah, for whatever the Historic District Commission is in the end, there are spots specifically for people who own properties in the district, so they'd have some say over their own.
And this has
All
been
right,
I'm sorry, Trish, I won't cut you off this time.
No, I mean, you had started actually before, but I am wanting to kind of wrap up the discussion for this evening. But do you have something you wanted to say first?
No, I was just gonna say that this is we've looked at many different things to try to preserve, you know, downtown Ashland, and if it doesn't, you know, we hope it goes forward. You know, if not, then you have to look at other alternatives. As far as the mill buildings go, I mean, it seems to us like that ship has sailed. But even still, I mean, we got all kinds of promises in the original go-round. He was going to keep 2.5 of the facades. Now it's down to 1.5, and you know, all that stuff that we've been through. So looking around, you know, to prevent the destruction of downtown Ashland at the hands of developers, if you want to get hysterical about it, you know, that's one of the, you know, people say that all the time. This is not the town I grew up with. Well, nobody's town is the town they grew up in, but you know, they can preserve some of it, you know, and at least the feel and look, because people move to these New England towns for a reason, for these little small towns, and as we're growing as a bedroom community now, from being a farm factory town, I think it's worth preserving some of the character and of the town's history.
Yeah, yeah, just speaking as an individual, I think so too. I think there's a lot here to be, obviously if you move to Ashland, you fell in love with it for a reason, and everyone probably doesn't love the same things, but there are things you would like to see preserved. That said, for me, I would not feel responsible in doing my due diligence if I didn't take the time now to look at this in more detail after our discussion. I would like an updated map with
I'm sorry
that it's the right thing.
I don't know if is the updated map on the online version, Stacy? Do we know? These were printed out by the town by Susan.
Yeah, I'm
so
not sure. Yeah,
we need to fix that.
It was required that I used whatever the assessors had, and I think.
Because we had a mistake on it, and I thought we fixed it.
Yeah,
but
that little that little bit there is
Across from the
actually,
train station.
Yeah, I'm
that
wondering
is-
what the
Yeah,
building's
it
to. Do you know if
shares a lot.
massmappers.com, do they have a bit more updated than this? Do you know? I don't know.
I don't know, I don't know,
may.
yeah,
You know, we-
but I know that little bit that's next to the strip mall, it was all one lot at one point, so
Yeah,
it was.
I don't
it
want to
got
go into
looped
like the
in with
longest, it's
district
okay,
because
it's
part of
okay.
it.
I don't need to go in. I just wanting it to be updated, so we have the updated map in front of us.
Right.
And I think it would also be good to have some, that whatever map it is, like I'm marking on my map, like, yep, this house is gone, yep, there's a building here, yep, like I'm correcting the map as I know it. And it would be good to have that to really to understand whether that's through us or, you know, if you guys have some notes on that, so that we really understand what it is when we're looking at the bylaw and the proposed guidelines, I should say. So my proposal would be that, yes, you did come before us before, but it was very late at night, and we apologize for that. It was very late at night.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and thus it was very short, and you guys were very patient at that time. And so we wanted to give it its time tonight. But I also, I think this should come back sooner rather than later after we have a chance to digest this information. I know our other member, Anna, is also on screen. I think she's not feeling well, so hasn't really had maybe an opportunity to comment as well. So, so I want to make sure we are able to have a fully informed research and any further questions that we have before we take that vote on it that you've asked for. Opinions from the board?
This one is, I would also want to kind of revisit these exclusions. It feels like it's too broad at this point and may not really get us to where we are. I've seen communities where they even define the color of paint. It has to be a historical paint palette. It cannot be any paint. We seem to have omitted some of those in this exclusion, so I would love to take a stab at it and kind of share those thoughts just from looking at the map that you have or the area that you're looking at and give you some suggestions.
Yeah. Well, we specifically excluded color from the thing, from the bylaws, because we didn't, feel it was appropriate.
Kate?
So along with Deepa's point, because so this has been approved by the state.
Yes, so I'm not sure if any changes we make, I would have to send it back to the state, and that's going to delay this.
And that's what I'm saying, like, I don't think, so I'm an advocate of, let's not say we did it once and ignore it. This, I assume, Deepa comes up with some wonderful suggestions and other people in the community. This can be presented at spring, and we say there's people working on the committee, and maybe you do want them. I'm just kind of putting that context for me personally. Waiting doesn't get you preserving history in my experience, particularly watching in Ashland, so.
Absolutely. Should not put a wrench in your process for sure.
Amanda and Anna online, if you have a comment.
I mean, I think my comments are similar to Deepa's, where it's sort of tweaking content, but if that delays past Springtown meeting, perhaps that's not appropriate. So I think I had sort of similar thoughts.
Anna, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I certainly support the concept of it in premise, and I think it's good to get some specifics to vote on. If the rest of the board feels like we need a little bit more detail, I'm certainly willing to do that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like I want to be able to really read through all the material in the light of the discussion that we've had tonight and digest it all before proposing a vote on it. So I would suggest that we don't have to officially
No.
but I would suggest, I think our next meeting is looking kind of full, am I right? Yeah, but what about the first meeting in March? Would that be?
Yeah.
Still, is that doable? Give us a little
Yeah.
time to get questions together.
Suitable. And if you have any questions, please send them to me.
Yes.
And so I'll do my best to get them addressed by hook or by crook, by somewhere,
We won't leave you hanging to the last minute.
Yeah, no,
We
I
want
mean,
it
that
to be
would
a
help.
dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
that-
I agree. Thank you very much
Okay.
for considering it.
And the goal for that March meeting would be to kind of say yay or nay to the concept of historic district.
Yeah, I think if
Yeah.
if the board feels it's appropriate, and it probably is, that we take a vote on it, if, you know, of how we feel about the proposed bylaw?
Yeah, it's not, I mean, just so you know, it's not mandatory that you folks vote on it to go forward. It's more of a courtesy from our perspective, because we'd like to get the town behind us as much as possible.
Right.
So if it's yay or nay, it doesn't really, you know, affect the
You
process.
don't need it, you're just.
I don't need it, but I
seeing what
would
the
like
sup-
it.
Seeing what the support is.
Yeah, I would like it, you know.
You put it very well.
Right.
And I just want to add, though, I appreciate, because if it's in front of us, it's at least getting hopefully some more publicity, and
Exactly.
that's what you want and we all want, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Exactly.
Great, thank you for
Thank you
coming.
very much.
All right, next on our agenda. That's good, we've been waiting for that one for a while. We've been intending to do that. Next on our agenda, discussion of the update to the floodplain overlay district, section 8.1 of Ashland zoning bylaws. Peter, you can take this away.
Sure, thank you. So first and foremost, Alvaro's here tonight, and he's helped us out a lot on this. And also Becca Solomon, our conservation agent, is joining us online. So I just want to point out and thank Becca for jumping on this call to update this bylaw. So the flood overlay district was last updated in 2014, and that was done using FEMA maps. So from time to time, which I actually have in front of us on this table, so we can get up and walk around. I know we've been sitting in our chair for a while. So this past year, I lost my train of thought. So from time to time, these maps do get updated, and I put a little fact sheet together in our packets, and it just kind of talks about what the floodplain district bylaws are. And so I'm just going to kind of pull those up. And so these have kind of been around since the late 1960s. And to do so, communities adopt the regulations, and then it allows a community to take part in the flood insurance program, theoretically, that the government provides. So with that said, Ashland, for numbers of years, has obviously opt-in. We do adopt these maps, and from time to time, they are updated by FEMA. Ashland is lucky enough to be in two watersheds. The Concord, which is the Assabet, Sudbury, Concord watershed, and the Charles River watershed. With that said, this past year or two, FEMA and the State Department of Conservation and Recreation has been updating the Charles River watershed. And so we have 2 tiles of our Ashlands, I believe 10 or 11 tiles. And if I bring up, if we can look at the maps here, if anyone wants to move around, I can explain what the tiles are. But 2 of the tiles are being updated. The 2 of the tiles are within the Charles River watershed. And so with that said, what we are being asked to do is to update our bylaw, first and foremost, and update the tiles, right? We only have to update 2 of our tiles. However, the state has provided us with a sample bylaw. Alvaro and myself and Becca have been working, and so that is what you see in front of us here tonight.
So Peter, sorry to interrupt, but when you talk about tiles, is that something we're seeing, like, is it these squares that we're seeing online?
Those are these squares. So in theory, and for everybody online, so these are the tiles, right, that FEMA provides. These are the maps from 2014, right? And this is all of Middlesex County. And as you can see, Ashland is down here highlighted in yellow, right? So each of these squares is a tile.
Is what you're pointing to on the desk the same, the squares that we're seeing up here?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So what we're looking at on the screen are a comparison between the 2014 tile and the 2023-24 tile, which is So, with that said,
But can I just, like, is this a tile or like is this square a tile?
that whole thing is a
Whole
tile.
thing is one tile.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is a tile, the
Okay.
lines are in between.
Okay, got it.
So what we're asked to do, and which we've been asked to do, is to update the two tiles within the Charles River watershed, right? And so this is what Alvaro has in front of us, and this is where I kind of, in the email I sent out, and Becca Solomon is here online, and Becca, I'm gonna make you a co-host as well, so you can unmute yourself. And Becca and Alvaro and myself, we've kind of looked at this stuff and we've analyzed it, that there are very minimal changes in the tiles from 2014 to 2024. So Becca, please feel free to jump on and fill in any blanks that I have not spoken about the two tiles and the updates. And Alvaro will help point out on the screen with the mouse. And also we have hard copies here in front of us. And then we can go into the bylaws that are here in the binder. So Becca, do you want to jump in and just talk to the planning board a little bit about the updates on the tiles?
Just to check, you guys can all hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. So I think the tiles you have up here are focused on the Warren Woods section. You can see the Ashland Reservoir off to the left there. So the area that is shown in the red circles there, that is a 500-year floodplain shown on the 2014 map in black. On the 2023 maps, they changed that to an orange area. You can see on the 2023 map, they actually took out that 500-year floodplain as it goes through Warren Woods and across Prospect Street towards Raymond Way over there. So that is the first change. That's the more substantial change. The other maps, which I see we just switched to here, this is in the corner over by Holliston. And when you first look at this, it doesn't really look like it's touching Ashland. And you would be right in the 2014 map. In the 2023 map, it's very hard to see at the scale. There's like 2 pixels of the blue, which is the 100-year floodplain, which is now within Ashland. That's over by Annetta Road over there. So it's very hard to see. Those 2 pixels are basically smaller than the size of a house. So it's very, very minimal of a change. I can see someone zooming in. Even at that scale, it's kind of hard to see.
But it's just basically like these tiny blue over the yellow line. Those are the 2. Yeah, when they're like recording the data, I guess, with like a airplane, I don't know if maybe they're like taking the picture, like the sample just looks so tiny at that scale. But yeah, that's what Beck is talking about right here, this corner.
Those are the only changes that, I know it's very small. Those are the only changes that are within Ashland. There's definitely much more substantial changes in Holliston and in other communities that are within the Charles River watershed. We don't have much of that watershed in Ashland, and as you can see, now we have very little floodplain associated with that watershed as well.
So Becca, can you explain on the first tile again, the one with the more substantial change, what the change is from then and now? Is it just?
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's just the elimination of a flood zone? Is that?
Yes, so they eliminated a 500-year floodplain. So that would be with the 500-year flood. They took that out from the Warren Woods area. So anyone who's a little bit more familiar with the names of the streams and everything over there, that's Jar Brook over there. And so the floodplain associated with kind of the headwaters of Jar Brook in that area has been removed, and the floodplain would not start until after you cross into Holliston.
And those are the only changes for us?
Those are the only changes with this update.
Okay. So it seems I guess then what's happening to the bylaw then?
So the
'Cause
bylaw
it's all
is-
yellow and green.
So the
and-
bylaw is the biggest change, right? And the bylaw is the bigger update, right? I'm just gonna take these back.
Okay. Because the changes with the yellow and the crossing out, it makes it look like everything is changing. Yeah, okay. Explain this to us.
Yeah. So Becker, if you can hang with us, because you're a pro at this stuff. So so you are correct, right? The biggest change is gonna be in the bylaw. So what the state did, along with when they rolled out these new maps for the Charles River watershed, they updated the bylaws, right? And so our bylaws were last updated 10 years ago, and there's a lot of updates that the state is asking us to put in. So working with Alvaro and Becca, we ended up taking the sample state bylaw, right? And our town bylaw, and we updated it, right? And so we took a lot of what they're asking for, but there are some situations where we have to kind of think about what we have to think about, right? What you're first seeing is a list of definitions, right? The state is asking us within this bylaw to regulate a list of definitions and that are applicable to this bylaw. So similar to the MBTA bylaw, we adopted the list, we put it first and foremost right after the purpose. And then we kind of dive in and kind of jump into the bylaw. With this, Alvaro was so kind enough to work with me on this one today, which was a couple long hours. What we did, right, is we ended up taking the old bylaw, right, and then plugging in the new language and verbiage from the state sample bylaw underneath it, right? And so everything in red is struck, and that is the existing bylaw, right? If you can see on this sample of the district delineation, a lot of the verbiage is the same. However, it was all chunked together. So what I tried to do is separate it. The other thing I want to note, which I did in this area, is Ashland's in 2 watersheds. So I tried to separate the 2 different watersheds to make it more organized and more clear. Because back in 2014, the state updated both the Concord and the Charles at the same time. We were on the same maps, right? The maps spoke to each other. At this point, the maps are going to be with 2 different years, right? And so I just tried to clarify that. Further down, just keep on going. We kind of take out some stuff. They update language, right? They use updated language. Most of it from a verbiage standpoint, it's very similar. Becca, correct me if I'm wrong. But there are a couple new things. The one thing that really is up for discussion, and I think we need to think about, is in the new state bylaw, right, as proposed, there's very limited and or no exemptions, right? In Ashland's current bylaw, as it was in 2014, there are exemptions, right? Can you go back up, Alvaro? So just to explain this right here, under the green, right? So the green is the existing bylaw. Right now, we have 7 exemptions within our floodplain overlay district bylaw, right? Agriculture use, forestry, outdoor recreation, wildlife management, foot bike paths. Pretty, I don't want to say common sense, but uses one could see happening within a floodplain, right? Then, if you keep on going further down, we do have a special permit application for any work within a floodplain. Can you keep on going down? The purple, right, is the proposed language that the state says. And what the state is saying in this instance is saying, hey, any work within that floodplain, installation of a fence, needs to get a special permit, right? And so a question that I want to lay it out for everybody is that, do we want to use, and I think it's appropriate, to build in these 7 exemptions that we have in our existing bylaw for installation of a fence and walking trails, right? Or do we want to just say, yep, you know, this is what the state wants, this is what they're recommending, right? And then just to add one nuance into this, because there's always a nuance, is that it came to us, right, within some state trainings, that they're also going to look at the MBTA, how overlay districts and how floodplain overlay districts interact with MBTA overlay zoning districts, right? So going back to what MBTA zoning district, one of the big elements of the MBTA zoning district is that those housing units are allowed by special permit, right? That you cannot have special permits on that property if it's zoned MBTA, right? So with that said, Alvaro and I looked at where does the floodplain district interact with the MBTA district, right? And it was about 6 acres. It interacted in 2 spots, right? It was a little bit on the Burnham's parcel, and then it interacted with the 10 to 60 Main Street parcel, right? And so those are the 2 places it interacts, but it's been suggested that we build in an exemption if we do stand with, if we continue on with our 7 exemptions and then just continue on with our special permit as is today in our bylaw, it was recommended that we build in exemption and we say no special permit shall be required within the MBTA overlay district's boundary, just where that interaction takes place. And so I did have to build that in. The state has called it out on a couple occasions within their training sessions, and I'm just looking to abide by that.
So I think, I mean, isn't it an obvious thing to update the MBTA zoning to not, like, so I feel like there's a reason there's a floodplain overlay district. This is serious, right? Comes from federal government on down. People study this, they change it by like 2 pixels, right? It's not determined by Ashland. And now we're like, hey, it doesn't really matter because we did this law that you told us to. And we do control where the MBTA zoning is. So like I think the obvious thing is not to just say, hey, go build there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to be update of the MBTA zoning to take those out of it. The 6 acres or whatever needs to be done.
Easier said than done. A lot easier said than done. And the 2, we'll start discussing this until we're done with everything.
No, I just wanted to point that out. So as you continue down, they do everything in yellow here, subdivisions, this 8.65, 8.63. These are all accepted updates from the state proposed bylaw.
So everything in yellow is directly from the state.
Correct.
Everything crossed out was our bylaw that we've
Updated.
gotten rid of, or that we're proposing to get rid of.
Correct.
The ones in red that's crossed out.
Correct.
The ones in red that are crossed out, right?
Mhm.
The ones in green are
What's
Or what
currently in
again?
there,
What's currently in our
and we
bylaw,
should keep.
that that proposing to keep.
that's what we're proposing to keep. Yeah, yeah. Becker, at this time, do you have anything to add? Do you
Yeah,
want to
I
give
just
your take? I think it'd be great if you could give your take on the update. I know you've looked at it, through and through.
Yep, I just have a couple of things to add. First, just in regards to areas that aren't going to be, that you'd have exemptions and waivers for, a lot of that stuff is still going to be reviewed by, say, the Conservation Commission, because fences, sheds, things like that, they're not exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act and floodplain in a lot of those cases. So there will still be review, there will still be permitting. They still have to provide compensatory flood storage for that stuff. So there are still protections within the floodplain. This bylaw is more to give you all a little bit of jurisdiction and input on that as well. And then the other thing I wanted to add, I know there's a couple crossed out sections. I see them on the screen right now. Some of that we crossed out because the state actually provides revised language for it in a separate section further down. So just if you're seeing a couple things on there and you're like, why are we getting rid of that? We had looked through the state proposed language, and there's a couple things in there. You can actually see crossed out number 5 is about subdivisions, and you go down a little bit in the yellow to 8.1.6, and there's an entire section on subdivisions that's been added instead. So just keeping that in mind, that might answer a few questions in advance, hopefully, as well.
That's a great point, Becca, and that's exactly, taking subdivisions out, we just added it in its own section. And so if you do look at the state, and we can send out an example of how the bylaws are written today, how this interacts with it, and everyone can kind of take a look at it, but we've just tried to go through it, reorganize it, color code it, obviously, to try to give everyone the best information possible. Like I said, the map parcels, the tiles, they're fairly minimal changes. When the state comes through with a update to the Concord River, obviously there'll be more changes to the floodplain in Ashland, just by fact that we have more tiles and more land area within that Concord River watershed than the Charles River watershed. So it's almost like we're doing this heavy lifting with the bylaw today, right? Which will hopefully make for tomorrow with the update to the Concord a little bit easier, where we would just have to accept the tiles as they were updated. But the biggest discussion points and to think about are keeping the bylaws and the exemption and the special permit as they stand, or taking a look at what the state is proposing and having that discussion.
I have I don't remember what's pink here, purple there. What is that? What was the code for that?
So that is the state's proposal,
Yeah.
which is the discussion point between the existing exemption and the special permit process.
So
Right.
it's not currently in our bylaw, and it's
No.
Correct.
The
And
green
it's-
part is what is there and we could keep, or we could switch it for the thing in purple. So in that case, everything on green on that section will be striked out and we will insert the language, the verbiage in purple. That makes more sense.
a little bit. So.
Yeah.
And then, is there anything that the proposed state bylaw had that whoever you, Alvaro, and Becca determined don't want Ashland to look at? So there were.
No, we took.
No, I'm just asking.
There were some things that were not applicable to Ashland that we did not, sand dunes. We have no sand dunes in Ashland. We have no barrier beaches in Ashland, right?
Yeah.
So those were non-applicable.
Okay.
But everything else was built in. And we looked at it together. You can take this bylaw here that we have, and Alvaro, we made notes on it, and it says, see state 13, right? And if you, within the pack, the information that we sent out, it's the state model bylaw, and it will say 13, boom. So you can kind of you have to mix them. You have to match, we've matched them up. We've done the hard work, right? We took the state bylaw, we reorganized it, matching it to what Ashland's existing bylaw is, right? However, there is this topic that we have to look at. There's new items, right? And I just for a point of, conversation, it talks about recreational vehicles, right? And you'll find this in I think at
8.1.9.
8.1.9, what a recreational vehicle is. A recreational vehicle is a Winnebago, right? And so the state is saying, if you're gonna park a Winnebago in a floodplain, right, you need to have it anchored, right? So if a flood ever comes, a Winnebago doesn't go down the river, no pun intended, right? So that's a new element that the state's asking us to put in. Or you don't park your Winnebago in the floodplain. And so that doesn't mean you can't park your car or an everyday vehicle such as a truck, but, you know, they're starting to look at campers, RVs, I guess, right? Winnebagos. So everything was brought in, Kate, from the state, and it was just organized in a way to meet what Ashland has in its current bylaw.
Green is current?
Green is current.
My question is, you mentioned that the Concord one is yet to come, and that's where the larger chunk of ours kind of, by doing these edits at this point and not knowing what's coming down the pipeline, is this like safe time to update this, or should we wait? Because if that's what has a massive impact versus the Charles, which is literally pixel count.
I don't know if I have a,
Where I'm saying,
I don't
like,
really have an
is there
opinion.
a kind of a timeline necessity that this needs to get updated now versus wait till the next map comes in?
I believe so, because I was on the training with the DCR today, and they said that they wanted to see a update by, was it July 8th?
They want to see towns within the Charles River watershed updated.
And just to clarify, like, there were two changes to the tiles, the little 2-pixel one and the area that was eliminated, but we have a lot more floodplains.
Oh,
right?
110%.
They just have not changed.
Everywhere.
They
And-
just
and-
haven't
And
changed.
that's what this is all about.
Correct.
The ones, all those ones that are left.
Correct. 100%.
Where you can't park your Winnebago.
So
Okay.
this bylaw would pertain to the entire town, right? Those two, I'm gonna call them squares, tiles, are just updates within the Charles River watershed basin.
And what's the process between us and conservation? Like, obviously, it's a bylaw, so it has to, it's a zoning bylaw, so it has to go through planning board, but conservation is looking, what were we
So-
talking about that?
It's kind of a team effort, right? Becca is our conservation agent,
Yep.
she's our tree warden. Becca's very knowledgeable on wetlands and.
But this doesn't go through conservation.
No.
Okay.
So it still would require planning board, you know, if there was work to be done within the bylaw, within the floodplain, it would still require planning board. However, if work is done within COMCOM's jurisdiction, correct me if I'm wrong, Becca, a lot of this stuff would be triggered with conservation's approval in hand. So this is one of those areas where conservation and planning are always gonna have, review theoretically of the same, of very similar projects, right? Indoor projects are gonna go to both committees, per se. Becca, is that a good way to explain that, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain it. And just to bring it down a little bit more into comparison terms, it would kind of be similar to how the planning board and conservation both look at stormwater right now. Obviously, the planning board has a certain level of jurisdiction on stormwater review, as does conservation, and that's shared. So this would be a similar situation where you would have a certain amount of review over the floodplain, and conservation has our own regulations under the Wetlands Protection Act to deal with as well.
Okay, so this is something that goes through planning board, not something that goes through conservation, and that's, like, is this something conservation needs to take a look at, or, hey, this is just coming from the state, so
I think it goes both ways, right? It's coming from the state, right? It's a federal update to the FEMA maps, right? DCR is the one that is being the conduit of this information, and the DCR Floodplain Management Group. It does touch, obviously, conservation and Becca, and kind of, it kind of blends to her expertise regarding the floodplain and wetlands. However, this is a local bylaw and it's a zoning bylaw, so it does still kind of fall within the realm of the planning.
yeah, I get that, it's in our jurisdiction, I'm wondering just that, in the same way the Historic Commission is looking for support for a bylaw, you know, it seems like a bylaw that would also, you know, that conservation might be interested in looking at and saying that it's well-written and,
Yeah, no,
you know, does anyone else?
Well, I think the essence, that's why Becca and Al
Yeah,
and myself
absolutely.
are all working together,
Yes,
right? We're all
yes.
talking about it, but, you know, obviously, we can, I'm sure Becca can take this to the Conservation the
I'm just
Conservation
wondering if that's,
Commission.
it's an appropriate process, you know, to gain support, make sure there's no thing left out.
Well,
Yeah.
so along that lines, in the green on like 8.1.4, if this is the current exception, which potentially that's one of the topics, right? But it just says, you know, they're basically saying they're going to be allowed, but there's no reference to like Conservation Commission, other rules overriding this. And I feel like, you know, conflicts aren't good. If someone wants to challenge, I'm like, no, but you approved a bylaw that says I can do this, and why put the town in that position? I feel like that, if that stays, probably needs to be at least looked at from that angle.
What number was this?
8.1.4.
So are you?
Through the board, if I can just chime in for a second.
Of
Please.
course.
I'm not sure if it's on the version that's on the computer or on the screen right now. There it is. So in 8.1.4, in that kind of introduction paragraph where it says GL Chapter 131, Section 40, that is the citation for the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay.
I think we had discussed, Peter, putting it clearly in plain English, Wetlands Protection Act, and then putting the general law citation in parentheses. I'm not sure if this version had that update or if we decided to take that out. But that is the citation for the Wetlands Protection Act, saying that to be able to get these exemptions, you do have to be in compliance with both that and the building code.
Thank you, Becca.
I'm curious, so we said that either it's everything highlighted in green or the one that's in pink, purple. Is that what we said, or is that not?
That's just the
for
base. This is the start of the conversation.
Because a lot of the information that's highlighted in green is not all covered in those 4 lines. So I'm just curious, like, for example, the timeline on the receipt of application and under special permit, that's not all covered in these 4 sentences. It's kind of very specific about the use. And in addition to the 7 uses, there's obviously some language in the special permit about where the special permit is. So I don't know if it is apples to apples replacement. It feels like it needs, or am I not understanding this correctly?
Just one note, it's not all the part in green, it's just section 8.15 or the purple one. So the purple one will just replace a 1.5, not a 1.4.
Okay, but then that does not again talk about the within 10 days of receipt, for example, the line item 2.
So
This is not getting covered there.
So I didn't change any of that. That's how our bylaw reads today.
So what we're saying is we are still going to keep some sections of this and,
We don't have to keep, I didn't change a thing.
Okay.
Right? So it still needs to be scrubbed, right? It still needs to be discussed, but I didn't take, what we tried to do is say, okay, this is what we got now.
Yeah, just
We
so
tried
you
to
can, like,
organize
look
it, format it so it was readable, so we can discuss
so
it.
sections, okay.
Exactly,
that
The
makes
so-
colors
sense.
will be good.
So this is just,
Yeah.
we can change it, we can manipulate it, we can discuss it. But this is just kind of the start, the baseline of the conversation.
What's our goal tonight, Peter? This is a lot to digest. What do you?
This is it, really. If I think we can just take this, we digested it, took it in, think about it, bring it back,
Okay,
and then go from there, right? That's it. I think this is, the state is asking to do this. If we can work through this process and get it to town meeting, great.
Yeah.
If it's gonna take longer, don't put me on camera with the state, but we'll go to fall town meeting, right?
I think we should work through it. It's just a lot to digest
Yeah.
all
It's
at
just a
once.
lot to digest
Yeah.
at once. This is it. I just wanted to start the conversation.
Okay.
And
We
that's
just
it.
kind of like wanted to make it clear with the colors and everything. So now you actually can see what we're changes that we're suggesting.
The word "C" is a good one here. I know you sent this out. I don't remember if it was a
We
PDF.
haven't sent this out. We're
Yeah,
gonna send this out.
We'll
Okay.
send
I
this
was
one
like,
out.
did I see such colorful prints?
I was gonna say, can you send it out as
No,
a,
we're gonna send it
as a
out.
doc file? Like,
So-
I just have trouble with the.
No, I think
I'm
it's
having-
the printer, the green that's there is
It's a little, it's better to
different.
read.
much
Yeah.
better,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so what we sent out, I've sent out the little fact
C can
sheet,
be a loose word in this case.
right? A little fact sheet came out on the email on Friday. This little fact sheet came out, and it was just to provide a baseline. Okay, what is FEMA? What is the flood zone? What are we talking about here? We're talking about those maps.
Okay.
Right? We're talking about those maps, federal flood insurance, big programs, right? We're talking about an update to 2 tiles out of all of Ashland, right? And we're talking about the state provided us a baseline, right? We're taking that baseline and we've compared it to our current bylaw, and that's it, right? We're just starting the conversation, and Becca's here to kind of help us as a conservation agent, kind of guide the conversation. So that's all I had to think, that's all we need to talk about tonight about floodplain overlay.
Whew.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of homework to do between
No.
historic and this, yeah.
And I think this is where the elements, obviously, we deal with a lot of applications. This is an area we're dealing with something that we don't deal with often. And I do not deal with the floodplain often, right? Becca does a little bit more, obviously, due to conservation in the wetlands. But also, please know, within this, by de facto, the building commissioner is the floodplain manager, right? So he kind of has some say in this too. So we all kind of work together on it in a certain way, and it's just a matter of kind of doing the best we can all together. So Becca, do you have anything to add before we move on?
I think you
Okay.
basically covered it.
Thank you for joining
I just had
in.
one quick question, sorry. I'm curious about this MBTA one and what Kate just said, does it make sense to kind of look at it with this package versus looking at that as part of MBTA guidelines? And if we've kind of looked into that at all?
So we have a little bit, right? And I don't want to go down this huge rabbit hole with MBTA, right? In Ashland, Ashland, you need, right? All communities, right, need 50 acres, a minimum of 50 acres, right, to be zoned MBTA. In Ashland, we have 56 acres, right? And that was done strategically to keep low density, to take advantage of what we have had permitted and what has been built, right? The MBTA bylaw was also built around Cirrus, right? Cirrus is the backbone and what makes Ashland comply, because half of our district has to be contiguous. Thank you. I was looking for that word, right? And so that's what kind of makes us. And that has kind of squeezed us down. And we ran a lot of numbers to make sure Cirrus on its own is our #1 contiguous 50% area, right? It works right now. It works how we have it. If we start adding more, if we say, okay, we're not going to put an exemption in for the floodplain, right? We have about a little over 6 acres of land, right? Between 10 to 60 and a little bit, maybe about
I think it's 0.3. I think it's
So you lose that cushion that you've built into that
Yes,
MBTA,
correct.
that's
Yeah.
where you're getting at.
So you
Okay.
lose it, okay, so 0.3 acres over at Burns, very small numbers here, right? Within that floodplain district, right? So if you say, hey, no exemption, that means we're gonna have to go out and find, in my eyes, 6 more acres, exactly. However, you still have to go back and look at the principles of the MBTA bylaw, right? You have to have 50% of your total acreage has to be contiguous on one lot, right? And so therefore, it's a lot, like what Tricia said, it's a lot,
It's not easy.
it's not easy.
The thing is, I
Yeah.
think the areas that we chose for all the MBTA and particularly these two, 10 to 60, no matter what this does, no matter what MBTA does, there's a proposal in front of the zoning board right now for it. Will it go through? We don't know for sure, right? But is this the point to change our MBTA? Because, I mean, this 40B overrides this, right? This doesn't stop 40B.
Correct. And also,
I mean, because that whole thing is in,
I don't think 40B overrides floodplain.
with
So that
said-
is, I don't think, correct.
So with that said, 10 to 60 is also gonna have to go in front of conservation, right? And meet conservation requirements with this, right? So it's something to think about. I think it would be very hard I think it'd be very hard to take the principles that we built the MBTA bylaw on, right? And try to thread the needle without going back out and having to do the whole, to really rethink everything once again.
But I think the importance is the whole reason why you have a floodplain, right? If MBTA, yes, that has its own consequences, but I think the whole reason why you have this on the larger part of the plan is to make sure you're preserving those natural resources. And if we are saying just to protect that MBTA plan, we are ignoring and giving that room for that 6 acres to be just slided in. I'm just curious, like, how does that really work, right?
I will just make a comment that I don't think it was like ignored, because when we were looking at the MBTA, there was also the sensitive layer that it was part of that process. So we were looking at zoning over it. It was part of the MBTA exercise to look at it and make sure that that was a red flagged area. However, it will still be included in the MBTA, like it will be still allowed to be zoned for development within the under MBTA regulations, because it always will fall back to conservation to take a look at that and for like.
So you do have that backup.
Yeah.
It was not, so it's not correct to say that it was totally ignored when we did MBTA. We did pay attention to that.
Yes.
We had a backup of the conservation
And
aspect.
yeah, because
okay.
let's say if like you take like and I know like this is because I talked to Becca that like if you take and like you like change a cubic feet of that will have to be recreated under like a certain area, and that will be something that conservation would overlook all the time.
Okay.
maybe for the next discussion we have on this, can you show us on a map those 6 acres, like
Yes.
that, where those are? So,
Does our current floodplain bylaw, this is where I'm gonna confuse the green, so apologies, but does it require a special permit for those areas within MBTA?
can you say that again?
I don't think there's an exception for the MBTA right now, specifically say, so it basically falls within a gray area.
But we are adding that as one of our line items under special permit in this package.
So like right now,
Because
those
you'd have,
properties would be in conflict.
Correct. It's a gray area right now.
Yeah.
because you can't have special permits for MBTA.
For any
So it
Right,
wouldn't
that's,
be
so I think
ultimately,
that's
yeah.
what I'm trying to make sure
Yeah.
that I understand, that currently our bylaw says that because it's not in the exceptions, it says it does need a special permit.
And it's just because MBTA is new, this is new,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that need to be
Reconciled,
reconciled, correct?
clarified.
All right, so is it okay if, and Anna online jump in if ever you have a question, but otherwise, are we okay taking in all this information and finding our next appropriate open space to go at it again? Okay. My brain can handle it.
No, I know it's getting late.
No, it's just a lot of information. Yes, it's just a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions, though, before we do that? Okay. If not, we don't even have to officially move this.
Nope.
Nothing to, okay.
All
So,
right, thank you so much, Becca.
thanks, Becca. All right, so next heavy-hitting topic on our list, accessory dwelling units. Why not?
Good stuff.
So,
Next up.
discussion of how to modify our bylaw for those at home, had a discussion about how to modify the Ashland bylaw for accessory dwelling units to be in line with the new state regulations, allowing them by right in single-family home districts. So that's where we're at. Peter, do you want to just give us an update about the work you've been doing? I think Anna has been doing some work as well.
Sure, so a couple things. We talked about this at the last planning board meeting. There was a couple principles that we did pull out of that conversation. Number one, correct me if I messed this up, is that we wanted to make sure that we were only allowing one ADU bylaw on per lot to amend to the bylaw, as discussed.
You mean one protected ADU per lot?
Correct, per lot.
Yeah.
Per lot. So that was built into this. We did talk about the distance allowable for a parking space. Right now, the regulations state that if you are within, or the parcel is within a half mile of the train station and/or here in Ashland, a bus stop, you do not have to build a parking spot. We talked about, Anna, correct me if I'm wrong, moving that to a mile.
Yes, I think we reached consensus at the last meeting
Okay.
that no parking space shall be required if the parcel of land is within 1 mile of public transportation.
Okay.
Did Anna did you send
No,
out this
Anna,
map?
I haven't sent out this map. Actually, I had asked Alvaro to do this today, so this is new for everybody. So regarding that conversation, I just kind of want to geographically show everybody where the bus stops were and where the train stations are. So obviously the train station here in Ashland is on Pleasant Street, which is right here. And then you also have the train station over in Southborough. And then you have two bus stops along 126, one at the Market Basket Plaza, one at the Shaw's Plaza. There is a bus stop at Cirrus Development, which is the RTA, and then there's two bus stops here in the downtown. So geographically, I thought it would be helpful just to depict those stops and the train stations, just to confirm everybody, see those from a geographical representation. Anna, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
and-
So obviously,
thank you.
there's the difference. The inner circle is the half mile. The outer circle is the mile. Like I said, we were able to put this together soon, so I apologize for not sending it right out right away.
My only question is, are these walkable? When you make that 1 mile radius, are these walkable to those bus stops or train stations? Because we don't have sidewalks everywhere in Ashland.
And this is as the crow flies and not as
Yeah.
a person
I mean,
walks.
it's a
right?
different thing talking about the number of units and why possibly the 0.5 mile radius was set in place to begin with, because you don't want people walking on the streets in Ashland if it's not meant to be. So are we triggering other challenges with increasing this radius?
Yeah, I'm not, I think that's a really good point. And I think also, when I think about it, okay, if you're not providing a parking spot, yes, there's definitely some people that even if they're a mile out, won't want a parking space. But I would say the majority will want at least one. And if it's a couple living there, they could have two. And that's all then parking on the street, for those cars versus providing off-street parking. So I think that's a little concerning, to me.
So the question is, though, we aren't saying they cannot provide parking. We're saying that the consideration is requiring.
Right. I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking a mile out, and that's showing it, like I said, by the crow fly. So likely someone's walking typically more than a mile in most cases. might, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that's a good idea. And the other thing I think you were searching for, Peter, just to throw it out there, is that we had decided no short-term rentals.
That's true.
As a
Yeah,
part of this at this time.
That's true. Yep. Those are added in. So what I did do, I did take a look at a couple sample bylaws. I pulled some things out. I looked at our existing bylaw, and then I created what's in tonight's packet, which is an example bylaw. So I was able to send this over to Anna. I know Anna took her look, put her eyes on it. Obviously, this is just being developed within kind of the development stages. And again, I think tonight, I'm just trying to get everyone's, I think the biggest goal here is just to present some ideas, some discussion points. Everyone can kind of take them back, take a look at it, and then kind of continue on. So drafting a bylaw that obviously fits the town of Ashland.
So yeah, and I'll add, I did review Peter's draft, and I thought that it was good. Obviously, we need to kind of confirm our consensus. I personally am not disturbed by the 1 mile issue. If there's not consensus, I'm okay with the 0.5. It certainly, this map just shows me that we're kind of being super flexible relative to ADUs. We can also go 3/4 of a mile. It doesn't need to be half a mile or a full mile. It can be something in the middle if we wanted to find a compromise position, but I'm also okay with the half mile. I think the one thing that wasn't clear for me in Peter's draft, I think for setbacks, we wanted ADUs to conform to existing setbacks. And that language, Peter, I just want to make sure it's in your draft.
Yeah, no, I think that's one thing that I know we need to look, I needed to add.
Yep. And then the only other thing is your bylaw draft did not mention the permitting authority. Like, who would the people go to? Is it the building commissioner?
So it's going to be the building
officials?
commissioner.
Yep, so we should probably add that to the bylaw. Those are my only two kind of changes, or three, I guess. What's our consensus on the parking distance? Let's add the permitting authority, and let's make sure it says clearly what we agreed to on setbacks. And I think with those three changes, Peter's draft is, in my opinion, worthy of public comment at our next meeting. Did I lose you guys?
Nope,
Yeah.
we're all in the
No,
room.
we're
We're
just
reviewing
reading.
work.
Thinking.
I'm just thinking about the parking distance. I'm thinking about like a day like today, and I feel like a half mile is a whole lot more doable than a mile, as the crow flies, potentially longer than a mile. And I'm thinking about like what would realistically happen in that situation, and the increase in like overnight street parking and the strain that would put on police and fire and plows and everyone when they're trying to, do we have a bunch of cars that are not lawfully parked in what looks like a whole lot of town with the 1 mile radius versus sort of a much more manageable swath of town at the half mile.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I wonder is, okay, yes, it doesn't mean they can't. They can provide parking if they want to. But I'm afraid it gives, especially for people who are doing it as a rental and not for a family, that it gives kind of an out, like, okay, I don't have to construct another parking space, which is, obviously, it's a little bit more money to provide it. I don't need to have another car park on my property.
Or I don't want to give up one of my own.
Right, I don't give
That's
up one on my own.
yeah.
I don't want someone else, the renter parking on my property, so they have no choice then to find a spot on the street, which then it becomes the neighborhood's problem or the neighbor's problem versus the person who put in the ADU's problem. And I'm not sure about causing that kind of, where a half mile seems much more plausible that they're like, great, I don't even need a car here, awesome, so I get that.
Agree. Especially looking at like just sort of how much of town is covered by the 1 mile versus the half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing we can do is we do have a sidewalk layer, a GIS sidewalk layer. So if, in particular, we could lay that sidewalk layer, and then come in a little bit closer, and I think let's be realistic here. Kate, you live pretty close here, right? And there's this area, obviously, I'm just gonna take this and look, behind the Market Basket Plaza, right? I know there is a trail there. It's a well-used trail, okay, so that's a well-used trail there. Obviously, this neighborhood obviously could get to it, so you're saying, okay, that could be a plausible link here. But then down in this area, at the Shaw's Plaza, the area up into Spyglass Hill and behind Spyglass Hill, right? There's really no direct sidewalk access that could get you down. There is a sidewalk now coming down.
Well, sidewalk access is
To-
one part,
Yeah,
but the other part of it is this ADUs is also either it's rentals for young family or older population. And the fact that now you're saying then this, whatever distance, you want the older generation to go looking for parking spot on the street, which may get challenging. And I think that's the other, because these ADUs are meant for very distinct group of folks, right? It's not folks with larger families, for sure. So I know we talked about it last week, but it feels like once you saw that map, that 1 mile looks like, to me, it looks like a huge chunk of Ashland.
I mean, I'd like to see the sidewalks we said, but the reality is we cannot require a parking space within 0.5 miles, and there's plenty of those places that people are gonna need a car anyway. And so I think, I don't wanna speak for anyone, but the raising is sort of like trying to make, I think the board and obviously the state agrees with trying to promote ADUs.
correct.
And so I think I can see both ways as well, but I think we have to not just quickly give up the 1 mile, I guess, which I don't hear the board is doing, but there's no way some of those people aren't gonna need a parking spot in the 0.5 miles, for your point about specifically older people. And we cannot do anything about it. So do we move the needle, right, and try to make the mile? If that encourages one more unit, is that worth it, right? We cannot solve the parking issues because that was created by that of not requiring. It doesn't mean they won't build, but we cannot require if you're within 0.5 miles.
You're 100% correct, right?
And I think that makes sense because that's walkable. But I don't see it in the, I don't agree with it in the mile. I think that's too far. I think that if you're a mile away, a half mile to a mile away, I think you can provide a parking spot, in my personal opinion. Just one, and these could easily be apartments for 2 people.
Are we even allowed to ask for more than one anyway, I think, is the way the law?
No, I wouldn't
just-
ask for one,
Yeah.
more than one, but
Yeah,
I think you
it's
should be
just
able
one.
to.
It's just one, we
Yep,
can't,
it's
yeah.
just one. Just a discussion point. It's all I think that's all, in the office, looking at regulations, looking at other bylaws. I know we talked about the half mile versus the mile. I just thought having a geographical representation would just kind of, is a different way to look at things. And so that's why we kind of produced it. Looking at the bylaws, we're just trying to draft them up. Obviously, there's edits to be made, and we'll make those. And it just kind of is to, I know, just to kind of get everyone's head, wrapped around, what is coming up for bylaw changes.
I mean, it's super helpful. Are you publishing any of these? Because people, that is part of it. We're talking about it. We're planning on it being in spring, and that's how you bring the public along. We looked at this stuff, and we didn't come to a decision yet, but by the time it's presented to them, we will. But these are super helpful, so
it
thank
hasn't
you.
been published yet, this was in draft, it was just kind of here as a discussion tonight. This was just made this week, today, right? And so, but we can, right? It's a discussion point, 100%. It's a tool
So why don't we include
in the
it?
toolbox.
I mean, it sounds like a helpful thing to include when we publish the draft, we
Yeah.
should include that as part of our reasoning. It seems like we're really close to that point. Like I said, if we make those changes, I'm okay with a 0.5 in light of what I'm hearing on the board. The only other thing I was gonna ask, I guess, the designers and architects on our board is, I think some communities have created almost like guidance of what the ADU should look like. Are we gonna sort of leave that alone and come back to it, once we have something in a year or two and we can see how it's going? Do we want to create any kind of design recommendations? The Ashland, should it look a certain way downtown versus on 126?
I'll just share my opinion on that, and is the biggest thing that one of my takeaway points is that the state is saying is that if you don't do that for a single-family house, then you shouldn't do it for the ADU, right? And so we do not have design guidelines for single-family homes. So I think we can do the best that we can to kind of say that this should, be reflective of a housing unit and obviously should be connected to the principal structure. But I'm hesitant of going full-on design guidelines on an ADU when we don't have them for a single-family house.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that too. I'm trying to think how you would do that. Like, you could say, the ADU should match the existing house, but you may not want it to in some cases. I've certainly seen additions that were better than the original house,
And
so.
I think the market is now getting flooded with a lot of prefab modular units, which are like absolutely stunning, and they absolutely fit in the square footage that we're looking. So I think we should not narrow ourselves down, and they may be cost-effective options as well out there. So I don't know if it's too early to even think of design components for this at this stage.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my designer mind says, yeah, there should be a way to write this, but I don't know what it is,
And-
to get the result that I
And just
would like.
Just a
So-
takeaway point is, these structures, if new, if detached, right, and/or detached or within, right, the principal structure, they still have to meet fire code, right? They still have to have a
Building code,
foundation.
yeah.
They have to meet building code.
Energy code,
Energy
everything,
codes.
yeah.
You name it. This isn't going to be, you're not gonna, like, I joked around the other day. I said, you're not gonna go to Reeves Ferry, right, and grab a shed and say, okay, I'm gonna turn this thing into that Reeves Ferry shed does not meet building code, right? Does not meet fire code. So if you are going to build one of these, or whoever's going to build one of these in their backyard, it is still an expensive addition, right? And
Tiny houses are not anymore.
Yeah.
It's like $75,000 for like 750 square feet or something like that I literally saw. So there are a lot of options out there.
There's
So,
options.
Yeah.
And also they're gonna have to meet sanitary code, Board of Health.
That's true.
What are you gonna do with your septic system if you're on a septic system, right? And so there's a lot of, questions that have to be added to before you say, okay, I'm gonna build one of these things.
I have a question on that, where the 7.64 on the sanitary sewer. ADU shall have meters for both water and sanitary sewer separate from the principal dwelling, but you're allowed to have an ADU in the dwelling, so that seems
Correct.
not right and not in keeping with encouraging these.
So, but with that said, the DPW made the suggestion that they would like each unit to have its own separate meter.
But when you have I
guess you
I've
could,
owned a two-family unit and had one sewer pipe. Like, I think we're asking for so much more, and I don't think that's the intent.
Okay.
Like, there's no way around that, because that's,
Maybe it's just a water, maybe it's just I'll double check with, I'll talk to DPW again. But they wanted a meter, because each unit, right, one unit could be rented, they wanted each unit on a separate meter.
so
that's
the
just for-
meters can probably be separate. It's connecting to the same main sewer line, maybe the same.
well, the
it's getting
sewer
borrowed
doesn't.
From the house.
No,
main
but the
house.
sewer, they're saying a separate sewer connection. Sewer doesn't have a meter, water does.
Okay.
Yeah,
That needs
what
to
I
be
mean is
edited.
it's
Yeah, I
probably
think we
getting
gotta-
connected to,
yeah.
the meters can still be separate.
Yeah, but it says a separate sanitary sewer, and I think a lot of times the homeowner would possibly want that, but if
Okay.
you are allowed to have it in your house,
Yeah.
right, it says that, and now you're putting a roadblock that is not helping get an ADU.
Okay, maybe my language is wrong. I'll double
Yeah.
check with DPW and make sure I kind of,
But, I mean, why do
factored
they
that in.
need 2 meters? Like, can't we encourage 2 meters but not require? Can we be like?
Yeah, that's what I'm leaning
Some
towards.
things like that too?
It feels a little restrictive.
I can ask DPW.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's get
I-
DPW's input and why, like the why.
Yeah,
like recommendation and why
Yeah,
for
it
these
was their
various things.
recommendation
So
when
that,
I talked to him about it.
yeah, so we can understand it better.
But yeah, we can dig into that. That's not a big deal.
We also look into what Natick is doing because I'm not sure that's a thing. So like, why are other communities not doing versus us?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, Anna, but that's a good point.
I mean, it seems like we're really close to kind of having this wrapped up. If we wait another meeting, are we going to lose the ability to present it at the spring?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
I
we'll
feel like
need
we're
to-
really,
we'll still
we're
need
really
to have the
close.
2 public
Yeah, we'll
hearings.
still have to do public hearings and it's still
Yep.
February.
Can you guys,
Make like a schedule.
yeah, like
Yeah.
schedule it
I
out
was
for,
thinking that.
both of these
Yep.
bylaws kind of going
Mhm.
simultaneously or whatever, so that we can
Yeah.
make sure we stay on track?
Yeah.
Alvaro knows the drill.
Yeah.
Just going back though to the water and sewer connection, the big, DPW does every T, right? Every connection to the water system, right, is a point of weakness, right? It's a point of, it's a potential point of failure, right? So they don't want to expand on that. They're not saying, oh, okay, put a separate tap into the street, to the main. They just want you to continue that tap off the street. But when they got to the meter, if you're doing an addition, right, and/or if you're building a detached structure, right, you're creating an own meter, if it's a separate meter pit, whatever it is. And we'll dig into it a little bit more, but say if it's a detached, it's at least giving you a gate valve you could shut that off at.
But you're saying there's already the house, a structure's there. That's what this is. Something has to be there with a water connection. And so
Correct.
they would
Branch off.
prefer a new one or they wouldn't prefer a new one?
So they would prefer, if you went with the ADU, they would prefer a second new meter off of your
But
main
not a
coming in.
branch. line.
Not off of from the street, is what
Correct.
you're saying.
They're
Yeah.
not saying pull a new main in, right? They're saying, and I think in some instances, because of the added load, you may be having to upgrade the main coming off the street, right? So if you have a 1-inch main and you're looking to do a detached structure, from a pressure standpoint, you may have to upgrade to a 2-inch main, correct? Not really my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
but
Depends on the square footage.
ex-
So the 900 square feet compared to the main house, that square footage may decide whether you need to go to a larger branch. Majority of the times, I don't think it's required.
yeah, because I think most people have probably an inch main coming in, right? So, food for thought. We'll dig into it with the DPW, but it's just something to think about.
I mean, and I think just one more thing about that, like, it might be, if it's a separate structure, we're asking, but if it's in an existing structure that has it, I think it just makes it much more difficult, and I think we've all switched to saying, let's go and get this and make it as reasonable as we can.
I agree.
So
Okay.
there could be an option, right, that might meet DPW, but still help, I guess, too.
So it's a question, also to understand it, if it's a separate structure or if it's kind of an apartment within a house, right? Two kind of,
Addition versus ADU, right? In that case, wouldn't that become like an addition?
I think it's addition versus
Detached.
yeah, detached versus something enclosed or.
Yeah.
It could be, I could see like a third floor attic space being changed into an ADU that's fully encompassed into the existing house and roof. And now how do you, now what's the easier?
I'm
Yeah.
not going to wear my code hat there.
A lot of the additions used to be like family. So in that case, maybe like an extra meter didn't make sense because they will share like the water bill like internally or something like that. But now that it could potentially be rented or something like that, maybe that's where DPW is like thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good just to understand, especially safety, maintenance concerns. I mean, obviously, I think it's be up to kind of the homeowner, like, do I want to charge one rent and then they can use as much heating and cooling and water and whatever that they want? Or, hey, they're just gonna pay on their own. If they use more, then they pay for more, right? So there's kind of pluses and minuses to both. But for the DTW stance, that's, I think, what we have to pay attention to.
All right.
Okay. All right, so next on the agenda, are we good with that topic?
Yep, all
All
set.
right, for now, okay. And yeah, and that calendar would be very helpful, just to keep us on track this spring. Okay, discussion of the planning board open seat. I don't think this is anything, it's not really a discussion of the seat, it's more just a discussion, an update about what's happening. So, right now, I believe we put a placeholder on select board?
Correct. At this point, we have we've received one talent bank form from Amanda Hayes to fill the open seat. We do have a placeholder on the select board. I have their agenda. I've actually drafted up an agenda for next Wednesday night. I know through conversation, Amanda will be driving back. So the question is, and I'll leave it to Tricia to carry the conversation, does the planning board want to move on this, and what's the best path forward?
Well, my question was, we have two opportunities to get this done, and it has to be done. Our next meeting is the last opportunity to do it, to approve a member to fit. Otherwise, we just have to wait until the election, right? So, which isn't, it's not terrible, right? But, but I thought if we have enough members, we have to have at least 3 of the 4 of us on the select board meeting at whatever time we designate, to look at the candidate, if, that I thought we would keep a placeholder there if it works out. And it might be a little bit last minute thing if it's gonna work out, right? So I was kind of looking for people's availability, otherwise we will just kick it to our meeting on the 27th. So I'm asking, I guess, and the 4 of us, is there, if people want to look at their schedules, can they, and I think the select board is probably pretty flexible about the time we do it.
The time set on the select board agenda at this point is at 9:45.
Okay, 9:45, so it'd be checking in.
Is that on the 9th?
The 19th. Yeah, the 19th. And I have their draft agenda I can pull up too.
There were no applications with the advertisements, is that?
It's out there. It's been, but there is no closing date on the application. So.
Not that I want to necessarily stay up that late, but I know I might be stuck at work. So if they stick to the 9:45-ish, then, well, I can actually remote in anyway.
You could
right?
remote in as well.
If it moves too much earlier, I'd be reluctant to 100% commit. I would absolutely try, but.
How late do you work?
The last time I was doing a bid, my boss is like,
Oh,
why
it's a
didn't you
bid.
finish this? And I'm like,
Sure.
it's 9:30 at night. He's on California time, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and if it happens that we have to just, hey, we can't get a quorum, we can't get their select board, sorry, we have to kick it, then that's what we'll do. But I'm just saying, if 2 of you tell me tonight, Tricia, no way, no how, I can't do it, then it's a done deal. We can't do it, because there's only 4 of us, and 3 of us have to be there. So-
Feb 19th works for me.
So this would be Wednesday, the 19th, right before you go to bed. Could even be in your PJs. Anna, how does that look for you? Possible?
It's in theory possible, yeah. This is the 19th, which is a,
Wednesday. night.
Wednesday, the 19th, probably late on the agenda, 9:45.
And can be virtual, right?
Can be
Make a-
virtual, yep.
virtual, I shouldn't have a problem.
Oh, what did you say?
7:45.
Oh, I thought you said 9:45.
7:45.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, if it's like a virtual thing, I should be able to make it.
Yeah, it'd be 7:45 on the select board. That's what I have it slated as, is 7:45.
Is that better or worse for you?
I mean, it's worse because I'm dealing with California people for the
Okay.
bid stuff, so it's only 5 there. But I will try, and it's also shouldn't be long, so I could maybe say, sorry, I have to do this.
I
So
would assume it would be short.
I will definitely try, and it's a possibility. It makes it a little harder.
Okay.
100% say
All right,
yes.
so, but it sounds like maybe we would have 3 anyway. Like I said, it can be remote. And that would only be the case if we only have 1 candidate. If we have other candidates, it would immediately be kicked to our second meeting because we just can't do it that way then. So, okay, so we'll keep that on there.
Well, I'll say, would it help anybody if I reached out to the select board office and tried to move things around?
As far as a later time?
No, okay.
No.
Well, I just look at, I said 8:40, 7:45, 8 o'clock, update with Aaron, CPC, Jim Nielsen, Historical Commission. So I could try to flip things, but I would just stay with 7:45.
Let's keep it where it is
Okay.
for now. It can always get pushed later if need be, right?
Correct.
So, okay, so we'll give it a shot. Otherwise, it'll be on our agenda in 2 weeks. Okay.
Next week.
This is next week,
This is next week.
but if
It'll
it,
get, okay.
and that's the select board
got it,
meeting.
got it.
But if it doesn't work at the select board meeting, it'll be on our agenda in 2 weeks, and the select board they'll have to come to us again.
Got it, thank
So-
you.
So, which they've been pretty generous about doing, so, okay. That's that. And then, okay, so Kate, these were items that you added in. I think one was of maybe more higher priority than another. Do you want to take over
Well,
here?
so I know if we weren't slammed, we're trying to use time for planning, and our meetings are long, so I went back to that list, and I think the 8A site plan review timeline was mostly with Peter and Alvaro, and I wanted to see if there's something the board could do to help, and if we were gonna target the spring. That is like a formality, but I think it would help everyone, particularly planning department, right?
Yeah.
So can you just say the bottom line of what this change would be?
It'd be a very simple
yeah.
change. Right now, our site plan bylaw calls for, I think you have to open up the public hearing within 30 days. And what we would be doing theoretically is, however, if you apply Mass General Law regarding special permits, it gives you 65 days to open up that public hearing process. So in theory, we'd be changing that 30 days to 65, and that's it.
I mean, I would recommend we do that and try to get it on the spring, because it's obviously easier, and sometimes there's an application that has 2 anyway, so it's kind of a no-brainer to move it.
I agree 100%. I think we brought this up. It's just syncing up the site plan and the special permit to talk to each other. I think it's a simple move. I think if we do have a couple bylaws on the Springtown meeting, it makes sense to plug it in and move forward.
So it doesn't mean we have to wait to 65 days, because usually we try to
Correct.
handle things sooner than that. If it's just a site plan review, it makes sense to get it.
It just makes sense in my eyes.
It's also just for tracking it, to me, it's a no-brainer to put it on the spring, be done with it, simple. And since we're kind of doing a couple, it's probably a good way to add it.
Planning board,
That's, I think it's with you guys, though, to do.
Yeah, we can take care, that's a simple, I think with so much going on the last couple of months with MBTA and this and obviously, but we can draft that
Did we
up.
ask for enough placeholders, or do you have to ask for another placeholder?
We can take care of that.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal.
Okay, so, so at least look at that at our next meeting. We'll piggyback that discussions of that, the
Yeah,
public
that's a-
hearing for that with.
That's a public hearing, and, if we're gonna do that, to tell you the truth, there's a couple other items
Yeah.
in site plan approval, like the language.
Yeah.
It says for a meeting, I would call that a public hearing.
Yeah,
And
just clean it up, yeah.
that site plan approval bylaw, from a formality standpoint, could be updated with just, public hearing, a butter notification, things of that matter.
Okay, so we will get that going.
Yeah,
and get-
I can get that, we can get that moving by the next planning board meeting, or soon after.
Okay,
And the next one, so this has come up, a couple times in front of us, but also just members of the public, like, I'm not an architect, but the projects never seem to look like what was approved, right? And I think we have lots of examples, so we owe it to our community to kind of do better, I think, on that, and ourselves. And so things do change, and I think what made it clear is a very large project really isn't designed to that level, and things change. So, A, let's communicate that to ourselves and the public, and then have a process that those changes are essentially recorded, right? And so I have, I attached, there's many communities, there's actually more, but just sort of, you know, how they handle it. And the decisions that I think are what level of change by the process, like, we do spend a lot of time on color, so maybe that is, but maybe other communities don't even care about color, and they would say that's a small change, right? So maybe that's not a good example, but some of the other communities have very specific spelled out. I think that gets hard. It's like you're saying, how can I describe something like that? I think the second thing is, do we have a form, or just how do they modify their application, right? If they're communicating, I have this change, and then I think there's probably some deliverables. I'm thinking of the Asher, like, I feel like they did, that came, I think that's what got me thinking about it too. That came late, but the presentation when we asked for it was quite good. It was like, here's what changed, here's my little thing. So I think it's us just making a process. Here's what I want from you, right? However that is. To me, it's probably a separate form, so it's not confusing. It's just I'm applying for a change of review, whatever. And then what level of change I think is probably the more, the item that probably needs a little more attention. There are lots of examples, and I know there are more. I kind of just had to call it quits to get something turned in.
Are these examples that you're providing, are they a part of these towns' bylaws?
Yeah.
Okay.
Often it
Or is it
looked
written
like
into an
both.
approval?
Well, that's one way I'm thinking we could solve this and simplify. What seemed more often is their procedures, but I might have just found the thing that they're referring back to. But I thought there was an interesting, several communities had like, almost like the planning department's reviewing, and they're putting it on our agenda and saying, we're recommending this is a small change, right? They come to us with a recommendation, then maybe that is the process, right? We don't have to listen, we're the board, but they're giving their professional, recommendation, which might streamline it in one way. So they almost didn't seem to have, I found a lot of it said, the planning department reviewed blah and recommends on many different towns. But I couldn't find their policy, so I didn't put them in there. But I do know seems like a slightly different way to address.
I wonder if this is very similar to when, as a designer, when we submit permit drawings and it comes back with the permit reviewer's comments, the way we resubmit the packages with the comment and what was the action that the firm took to resolve that permit comments. So it's a cover letter that we prepare every time we resubmit our drawings. So I wonder if that's what we are looking for, like when we have presentations come back with updates. In addition to what we hear there, we have this as part of the package where it's a cover letter that talks about what are the updates from the previous one, so we can document it instead of creating a form. I'm not sure
I
if
think
that's what
that's-
we're looking for.
Some of these towns say like they want to see red line plans, like they say what to include, right?
So I think the thing is, like, some of what gets redlined or discussed back and forth is none of our business. That's with the building department, right? And so I don't want to get involved in that, but I do care that something we approved gets built, or we know about it ahead of time and talk about it, so we can have a record of doing our job, right? I can point to many things around that isn't that. And
that's not covered in our meeting minutes?
no, it wasn't at Asher. They built something different, and Peter and Trish kind of thought it was a little bigger, something that should be brought to the board. That's why they came back. But that was already built, not two plans. And I don't think that's great. I don't think that's a good. way
Yeah,
to
I mean, in
handle it.
that case, I would say that, you know, and this is where I'm trying to read through, sometimes the list of everything that's considered a minor change is almost everything about the building that sometimes it feels like, so I'm not sure. Like those changes they were changes, but they were changes that probably no one would spot in a way except me, because I was always looking at those elevations and studying the elevations and, you know, whatever. And so that's why I noticed something didn't quite look the way I remembered it. So, but they were still in keeping with the spirit of the building. Like, you know, what, I'm not saying that that's okay then. But it's not the reason I brought it to the board. I brought it to the board because I think it should have been, not because I thought it was a big change, but because I thought it should be, we should, you know, how do we deal with these type of things?
That's
Yeah.
exactly why I want to keep going on this, and I don't think it's super hard to solve. But I think it is, for me, it's to fairly represent to the public, it's fairly represent to ourselves. And if someone didn't think it mattered, as a developer, we make the position that yes, it does, right? Kind of
Yeah,
all
so I
those.
think it's about finding those, and I don't know if it's a bylaw or in the approval, you know, I'm not sure where it goes.
Or the inspection process, right?
Or the inspection process, yeah, that if you see a change like this, if then that needs to come back to us, or, you know, to both.
Because the
but-
inspection should be part with reference to the drawings that's been approved. That's how the inspection should be.
Right.
You as a designer, as an architect, you're able to spot, but if I was not having that design background and I went and spotted, I probably would not even know that. So until it's built into the
Right.
actual process.
Right.
And we are not involved in that, right? When the construction happens, we don't really go around. I mean, it's not, you must have done
We
it
were
out of
only there for
interest.
really, it was like an invitation. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to see the site, you know?
Well,
like-
but they also, they indicated that there was a point that I got this approved by the planning board and now further design, that it was different submitted, but we didn't see it, right? So there's several points to catch those things.
It's true, and it's a point of then trying to figure out, and this is where the whole question comes in, that if when we approve these projects at 20%, if that, of course there's going to be changes. Of course. Every project I do is different from 20% versus 100%. And of course, we don't want every little thing coming back to the planning board. That's all we'd ever do, right? So how do we find that line? How do we define it? And how do we, keep kind of, that we're abreast of these changes, you know, type of thing. So it's probably a longer discussion than we want to go through at 10:05, but, you know.
I mean, I think that the towns that have the process, I like Shrewsbury's because it sort of says what, like some examples of what de minimis changes would be. But it also says, listen, if you're going to make a change, even if it's de minimis, you need to tell the planning board about it, right? But it doesn't require a planning board approval if the chair and the town planner decide it is de minimis. And that I think is like, it takes the burden away from like the board at the meeting. Like if so for instance, if, you know, the Asher had come to you and Peter and said, here is the deal, you guys could have said this is de minimis, and it was all by the book, and they had done, you know, gone through it the way that we laid out the process, but it didn't sort of reopen, because that was the other concern with that project, like, are we like, you know, we don't want the public thinking we're like reopening that project and sort of concerns around those things. I mean, I think that there's a way to do it, and I like the way Shrewsbury did it, where they said these are some examples of de minimis changes. I think we always feel strongly about things like materiality, like colors. You know, what are you using on the building? That could be, we could provide in the process document like a very clear. These are examples of not de minimis changes when you're changing materials or colors or things like that.
Yeah, and I think it could be, I mean, I don't think it always just has to be, it could be the chair and one other person from the board, right?
Well, I
So
was
it's-
going to say, I sort of like that too, but I do not like putting the burden on the chair who's,
Well,
That's
you
the
know,
concern,
and,
is that that's a lot of
and I
back
don't,
work.
I think that it does need to have board. I would not want to sub that to the building commissioner or the planning department.
Yeah,
Not
but-
saying they wouldn't be involved, but I do not want to sub that decision.
Well, and also I think sometimes, like I said, it could be just better with two sets of eyes. It
Yeah.
could be the chair and it could be a different person every time, like when, if it happens, you know, more than once, you know, that just so there's a second pair of eyes and like, yep, we agreed with this, or we didn't agree, so it had to come before the board, or, you know, whatever. But,
So I guess what we're saying is we need to define a scale to these changes in some shape or form, right? Like, example, in the Shrewsbury is very specific about kind of changes in hydrant locations, parking space sizes. So it has to be quantitative versus kind of,
it's very loose on this, though. I mean, if you look at number
Yeah.
8, changes in site or building elevations, like, well,
And it says,
I
like,
changed
this
this
is an
doorbell, that's.
example.
Yeah, I
Right.
wasn't
So it has to
proposing
be-
like
yeah.
the language, but I love your idea of saying it's also doesn't include, because that's, you need guidance, and I would think it would be get down to kind of minimal that doesn't need more, but I don't think that means reopening either, right? And I,
Yeah.
the challenge would be to identify those elements, right?
I-
For a developer to know that, hey, this falls in this category, so I have to go back and check it out.
Well, I think what I like about the Shrewsbury one is that it says, we are gonna decide whether it's de
yeah,
minimis or not.
you don't get to
You have to,
decide.
basically,
Yeah.
you should be defaulting to bringing anything to us. If we say it's de minimis, then we don't, need-
You're all
you don't
good,
need
yeah.
full board approval.
Well,
True, but in this case, like she said, she walked into that space and noticed something different, and then that's how it was brought
Yeah.
up.
They
It was
would have had
not-
to say,
Yeah,
we're
so,
changing this. And it would be, so for the Shrewsbury process, like, right, in that instance, they would have needed to do a form for, I think in Shrewsbury, they do a modification of site plan form, and that goes to the chair of the planning board, and I think it's at the town planner, and they decide, is this de minimis or not? If it's not de minimis, then it goes to the full board.
well, and it would actually be interesting to know if there's another part of this process, because again, what we saw at 20% isn't quite what looks like the 100% CDs. They're at 20% of design versus 100% of CDs. That is
so is
night,
construction administration.
that is night and day. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is night and day. And then there are changes that can happen in the construction process,
Yeah.
right? Hey, they got a new tenant, so now they have to switch the door, you know, whatever. So there's actually two kind of levels here. One, when the final drawings are submitted to the building commissioner, and then changes that happen during construction.
So the
So-
one design, I almost think that should be a condition to submit them back to the board, and we can decide what to do about it. But why wouldn't we submit back to the board with a cover of changes? Let them put big and small, let them decide. Simple. They're gonna do that anyway, right?
Yeah.
That should be part of the process. Now, the construction needs a little more work, and that's where we're not gonna be out there, right? But maybe we should be starting to get more independent inspectors. But I mean, just like you said, that is part of their process anyway. That happens. Nobody just makes changes on drawings without some record of them.
Yeah.
So they already do that. We're not asking them to do more work. We are to submit it to us, but we're not asking for more work per se. So I feel like that can be an easy condition, handled, done. We don't talk about it more. We're going to draft a condition for that. And then the follow-on is more like construction, right?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be trickier. The one where you're reviewing construction drawings is gonna be tricky, because that's unless we have something in there that approval will not be, you know, whatever the phrase is, with, you know, unreasonably withheld, because there will be, you know, can you imagine going through another series of meetings? Like, you know, like, we really have to, you know, we have to be clear too about.
Yeah, but
you know-
again, nothing inside is under our purview. So it already minimizes what we're actually talking about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
that's true.
don't need to make this onerous. I mean, they
Yeah.
go through that process, right? And
Yeah, that's true.
I think that I don't think we need to outguess and like what we're asking, I think it's a very reasonable ask. We need to be responsible on our end, but I think this would make it just much more professional, and I hope never to hear from a resident, why do these buildings not look like what you approve? Because we will be able to show why if it doesn't. Right now, we cannot, right? And again, that is our job, representing the public in Ashland to get what we asked for.
Okay, so I guess the next question, and again, I don't think we need to go any further with this tonight, but will be like, where is this? Is this in the information given to the contractor up front? Hey, I want to do a project in Ashland, and then it's put into the approvals? Is it in the bylaws? Like, where is it documented and known? But again, I don't really, it's 10:10 and we need to still do just at least through the meeting minutes. So if we can hold on that thought. Anna, any thoughts from you? Or are you good on that conversation? Okay. Sorry, I forget you there floating around in cyberspace. Okay. So, all right. So we're discussing that. Any minimal reports on any important reports on any of these topics, since we're already at 10:10? Anything, Peter, or anyone else?
No, I have nothing. I just have, we got an application for, we have 2 applications, we'll hear them, I'll start to hear them. The next one, there's a cell tower update at 20 Ponderosa Road. And then we did get an application in this week for 240, 260 Pleasant Street. It's the 2 vacant lots down on Pleasant Street, and they're owned by Connect Church.
Yeah.
Connect Church, and they're looking to build a soccer field. And so they're gonna build a soccer field with a parking lot and a playground for the daycare. So that will be coming in probably the first meeting in March.
Yeah.
Alright.
That will be first meeting in March.
Okay. Sounds like something different.
Fun project.
Yeah, it's a good project, a feel-good project. I think it will it'd be good for Pleasant Street.
Okay. Great. So, any other things that you think are necessary to? All right. Then we can go to meeting minutes, get those taken care of. Just one set from the 23rd. This was this the YMCA? This was the YMCA meeting.
I only had one sentence, line 31. The dream of a regional YMCA in this area has been a dream for the entire 12 years he has been in this role. Do we really need that? Or if you want to document that, maybe then we should take off the 2 dreams that is there in that sentence.
Just so, just if you knock off the dream of in the beginning, a regional YMCA in this area has been a dream for the entire 12 years. He'd,
Yeah.
yeah, just simplify it a little bit.
Okay, I can take care of that.
Didn't have anything
Just
else.
clean it up. And just since we're talking about YMCA, I've been forwarding a few emails from really, like, I guess it's an individual, but related to CPC. So he's been asking me questions, and I've been sending them, which I think are good questions, but we're also going to be sending those to the YMCA, and we can discuss it, obviously, when the public hearing comes up, those questions. All right, I don't think I have anything else. No other changes? Okay, then Is there a motion from the board? Our first motion of the evening?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of January 3rd, 23rd Planning Board meeting as amended.
I'll second that.
And a roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So those are approved. I think then we are at the end of our agenda. Woo-hoo. Anything else anyone has? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? I will make a motion to adjourn at 10:15.
Second,
Roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
Amanda Hayes, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So thank you, everybody. Good topics.